Chapter 943. Divine Metal. The Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm is about to open, someone called out, and everyone turned their heads to look skywards. Ling Han could not help but turn to look at the sky as well, and saw that the previous sky that had been clear and sunny had, in a mere instant, actually been torn open, revealing a colossal sea. The width was unknown, but the waves were fierce. There was a frightening divine sense interwoven within, and a mere look would scare one witless. Hong long long. The desolate plain ahead of them also split open as well, revealing a huge tunnel. All of a sudden, a pillar of water shot up into the sky, forming a waterfall that was flowing backward towards the sky. The waterfall was flowing upside down into the sky, and connected with that sea in the sky. Suddenly, endless waves surged in the opposite direction upwards into the sky. The sound of the waves boomed like thunder, suppressing all other sounds. At this time, even if someone tried their utter best, he would not be able to hear what he himself was saying at all. Ling Han looked on with shock. This was too grand. There was a great sea floating in the sky, and it was so wide that it seemed like it could crush the entire joint peace planet if it flowed downwards. Furthermore, the water underground was actually gushing in the opposite direction into the sky, completely going against natural laws. He finally found out why this mystery realm was known as the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm. A sea in the heavensit was not just in name, but rather the actual reality. Everyone could only use their divine sense to communicate now as their hearing was completely disabled. They could only hear that endless thunder produced by the waves. That would be the heavenly sea. No one can fly above to get a clear look at it. There are no living beings inside that huge sea, and there is no end either, Lin Yu mused ruefully. There was once an elite of the heavenly body tier that steered a galaxy-level warship and entered within, but as a wave broke over him, the warship turned into pieces, and that elite did not even manage to flee with his spirit in time. He was crushed along with his physical body. The heavenly body tier on the joint peace planet was synonym for invincible, but even heavenly body tier cultivators ended in that manner, so that sea in the sky naturally became a forbidden area. Look! There's something. Someone pointed at that waterfall that connected the heavens and earth. Ling Han focused his gaze and looked over. There was a white-colored object flickering in the waterfall, but he could not exactly distinguish what it was. This was extremely shocking. A waterfall flowing upside down was in itself a very bizarre happening, but now, in the heavenly sea, there was actually an object that was going against the water flow and floating down the waterfall, which was an even more unacceptable fact to them. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, and could finally make out the rough features of that white object. It's a piece of metal. A white-colored metal. Heavens, the waves that could easily crush a galaxy-level warship and kill an elite of the heavenly body tier, but now there is actually a piece of metal that is still completely preserved. That metal must be extraordinarily heavy. How else could it possibly flow down the waterfall, going against the flow of the water? A top-grade godly metal. It must be a top-grade godly metal, which can be forged into the strongest spirit tool in this world. It could even block the destructive power of the heavenly sea. Is there any force capable of destroying it in this world? A few important people all exclaimed in surprise. They were all elites of the heavenly body tier, and as something that could move even them, the value of this piece of godly metal could be imagined. In that moment, everyone's eyes became fiery. One had to know that if this piece of godly metal fell down, where would it fall to? Into the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm. That was right. The Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm was not that piece of sea in the sky, where even if an elite of the heavenly body tier entered, he would be directly eliminated. If they went there, wouldn't they just be heading to their deaths? The Mystery Realm was under the ground, and only when the Heavenly Sea appeared would this Mystery Realm appear as well. Otherwise, even if you dug through the entire joint peace planet, don't even think you would be able to find it. Ling Han also felt a rush of excitement. Top-grade godly metal. Who would not want such a treasure? Moreover, others might not be able to mold this type of godly metal, but he had the Black Tower, so he should be able to, right? He could not help but ask, Small Tower, could you do it? I haven't seen it, so how would I know? Small Tower humphed. However, as long as it is godly metal, it would be a piece of cake. Ling Han caught the implication of its words and asked, So there is something that is even tougher than godly metal, and even you would not be able to refine it? Of course. Think, what material has the Black Tower been forged from? Small Tower said in a tsundere tone. What was it forged from? Ling Han continued to ask. He was indeed very curious. Divine metal. This time, Small Tower did not give an excuse like, your cultivation level is too low, so telling you would be pointless. Above godly metal, there is divine metal. However, godly metal is divided into many grades, and though there are many different types of divine metal, there is only one grade. It either is divine metal, or it is not. Every piece of divine metal has its own unique consciousness, and possesses incredible might. According to legends, we'll speak more on this subject when you actually get a piece. Small Tower was beginning to keep him in suspense again. When they were speaking, that piece of white-colored metal had already glided into the ground. The Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm is already open. Go in quickly. If you are not entering now, what are you waiting for? You must get that piece of godly metal. Whoever can obtain that piece of godly metal for me will be heavily rewarded. The important people all spoke up, urging the masses to descend. At the same time, they were offering amazing rewards to obtain that piece of top-grade godly metal. There was nothing else that could be done. They could not enter into the mystery realm, and so could only place their hopes on these youngsters. One could foresee that there would definitely be a fierce battle full of bloodshed that would be caused by this piece of godly metal. Let's go! Ling Han tugged on Xue Yenyu's hand. If they did not enter at the same time, they would appear in different locations when they entered into the mystery realm. Blockhead, wait for me! Li Weiwei hurriedly chased after them. Fourth young miss. Yet Tang Feng stepped out to stand in her way. He still wanted to be alone with Li Weiwei, so he was naturally hoping there would not be a third wheel with them. Damn it! Li Weiwei stretched out a hand in a palm strike. It was naturally impossible for her battle prowess to pose any threat to Tang Feng, but when she delivered her palm strike, a beaded bracelet she was wearing on her wrist exuded brilliant light. Pong! Tang Feng was suddenly sent flying, spitting out a mouthful of blood. A god tool! Tang Feng exclaimed in his heart. Moreover, it was no ordinary god tool. Otherwise, a shattering void tier cultivator would definitely be unable to activate it. It should have been refined multiple times by the left minister, and because of their blood relation, Li Weiwei was capable of activating the power hidden within. Ling Han grabbed a hold of Xue Yenyu's hand. Hong, the sound of the water was thunderous, ringing out in his ears. The waves here were very huge, but there were no divine patterns interwoven with them. Thus, even if they broke over shattering void tier cultivators, they would not die. However, if they did not have enough ability, they would still be throwing up blood like crazy. More importantly, the waves of water went against the natural flow, and were going upwards, yet the mystery realm was at the very bottom. Hence, they had to overcome this opposite force, or they would not even be qualified to enter into the mystery realm. Ling Han exhibited his nature-defying trait as his strength of 20 stars exploded in a burst, and he moved against the flow as easily as if he was walking on flat land. Additionally, his physique was really too powerful, so when the waves slammed against him, the force he felt was no more than a massage. Your speed is too slow. Xue Yenyu sent him a mental message. You enter into your spatial god tool, and I will bring you in. Ling Han could not help but grin bitterly. How could he possibly show off the existence of the Black Tower? He usually hid it within his dantian, and when he hid inside, the Black Tower would shrink to the size of a mustard seed, not revealing the slightest sign of its existence. If he ducked inside, Xue Yenyu would not even be able to see him, so how was she supposed to bring him in? Ho ho, since you are indeed powerful, then bring me along with you. In any case, my skin is tough and thick, so no matter how fast you go, this water flow would not be able to injure me. He could not possibly explain the uniqueness of the Black Tower to Xue Yenyu. Xue Yenyu turned right around to take hold of his wrist, and her figure abruptly sped up. Chapter 944. Taking the lead to enter. It had to be admitted that aside from the fact that Ling Han had defenses that could match a cultivator in the low extreme of the Mountain River tier, in other areas, he was still too far away from Mountain River tier. With this effort exerted by Xue Yenyu, their speed abruptly increased over a dozen times. However, these waves seemed to possess different strength according to the different cultivation levels they had. Ling Han did not even feel a thing, whilst Xue Yenyu looked like she was struggling. Very soon, their speed slowed down. Let me Ling Han took the initiative once more, and advanced with Xue Yanyu in tow. In this way, Xue Yanyu merely had to use origin power to boost herself and increase her defenses, so the pressure on her was greatly reduced. Though Ling Han did not go very fast, every step he took was incredibly firm. Overall, he was actually not that much slower than Xue Yanyu. In his opinion, the impact of the water flow had reached 16 stars of Shattering Void tier. Thus, it would be extremely difficult even for an elite of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier to stand against these waves. After all, the water flowed endlessly, which was equivalent to the elite having to endure this kind of attack at all times. And there was no way he could fight back either. Furthermore, the power of the waves differed according to cultivation level. Otherwise, the great elites of the heavenly body tier could directly escort them to the real entrance. As he imagined, it would not be a problem of struggling if these great elites entered. There would be a chance that they would be directly crushed. Thus, the stronger one's battle prowess was on the same cultivation level, the more advantage he would have here. Ling Han's strength had reached 20 stars, and he had attained the true maximum limit of the Shattering Void tier. Added with his physique that was on the level of godly metal, he could be considered invincible in this place. Could he hide himself here to ambush others? Ling Han gave it some thought, but ultimately still gave up this tempting idea. The reason why there was so much bloodshed and massacre in the Mystery Realm was because there were no witnesses at all, and no one could prove anyone guilty. There might not even be a body left, so how could the murderer be found? Yet this place was different. Everyone had to pass through here, so if he did make a move, there would be too many witnesses. To kill a student of the academy or a descendant of a court official in public was a heavy crime in the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Moreover, he might not be successful either. After all, they were all going into the Mystery Realm to hunt for treasures, so who would not be bringing some treasures that could save their lives? Ling Han shook his head, and, holding on to Xue Yenyu's hand, continued ahead. Although he started later, he was faster, and surpassed those ahead of them one after another. He was obviously not moving very fast, yet maintained an incredibly steady pace. On the way, even mountain river tier cultivators could only watch, and did not dare make a move due to feeling humiliated by being surpassed. In here, the majority of their origin power had to be used to oppose the impact of the water, and if they split out some origin power to make a move, that was practically courting death. About 2 hours later, Ling Han finally brought Xue Yanyu to the bottom of the water, and a pair of doors appeared in front of them. That was a pair of stone doors as tall as 300 meters. There were various shapes of beasts carved on the doorposts, and Ling Han could not recognize most of them. However, he could feel as if these beast carvings were alive and exuding an endless intimidating energy. They were obviously just carvings. Though he called them stone doors, it was actually just a stone entrance. On the door lintel, there was a stone dragon coiled above, vivid and lifelike as if it would struggle free of the door lintel and soar into the wilderness at any moment. Let's go! Ling Han felt much pity as he had not spotted that piece of godly metal at all on their way here. Otherwise, he would have been able to take it just by stretching his hand. The two of them entered the stone doors. They were drawn by a strange attraction as if it could pull them into pieces at any moment. They hurriedly grabbed each other's hand tightly so that they would not be separated. Pang pang! The two of them were tossed onto the ground at the same time. The surroundings had changed. They were no longer in an environment of water. Let go! Xue Yanyu rebuked, rolling her eyes exaggeratedly at Ling Han. Ling Han could not help but feel rueful inwardly. Before he had seen the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, he felt that every move that Xue Yanyu made was filled with allure. But now, though she was still as beautiful as before, compared with the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, she was missing an endless grace. He loosened his grip with a smile as per her words and asked, "Now where should we go?" It was not the first time that Xue Yanyu had entered the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm, but it was still only her second time here. She had come here 10 years ago, but if it was 20 years ago, she had still been too young, and her abilities were inadequate, so her clan did not dare to allow her to take risks. Before entering here, we would randomly appear in the surroundings of the Mystery Realm, and the further we go into the core area, the higher the chances that there would be mountain river stones nearby, Xue Yanyu explained. And there's also that piece of godly metal. This was constantly on Ling Han's mind. Even if that wasn't divine metal, To be able to withstand the force of the heavenly sea and remain undamaged, it had definitely surpassed the level of the heavenly body tier. At the very least, it would be a level 13 godly metal. Regarding this matter, Xue Yanyu could only shake her head in bafflement. Previously, there had never appeared a piece of godly metal that could actually go against the water flow and enter into the mystery realm. Who knew what corner it would be in right now? If it had fallen down randomly, then it could possibly be in any corner of the fringe of the mystery realm. We may not even have enough time to make a whole round. What more when there would be a higher chance that it would be picked up and taken away by someone else, she analyzed. That was very logical. Ling Han sighed. Then he could only hope that godly metal was different, and would appear in the core area. He looked at the environment around them. This was a very strange place. All around them, it was a bright crimson. This was a plain, but there were hills, which had stone thorns piercing through the air, in the distance. A crimson fog was twining above them. They could not see through it, nor could their divine sense pass through. A beast's roar sounded from afar, so loud that even the ground itself was trembling. Innumerable pebbles bounced off the ground from the impact. This place was not a desolate area without life. On the contrary, a lot of the danger came from the native demonic beasts here. The majority of them was in the low extreme of the mountain river tier, but there were some that had reached the medium extreme or even high extreme. When encountering a creature in the late stage or even the peak of high extreme, even a 4-star genius would have to make a strategic retreat. Thankfully, it is similarly in the low extreme. Xue Yanyu scanned it for a moment, and let out a sigh of relief. Then, she revealed a burning fighting spirit. We can try a fight. In this place, aside from mountain river stones, hunting demonic beasts was also a very important part. Without elaborating on anything else, the spiritual meat of immortal level demonic beasts was very nutritious, though slightly inferior to some natural divine herbs, and had surpassed the majority of alchemical pills. However, there were too many cultivators. The demonic beasts on Joint Peace Planet had suffered overhunting, and now, one could possibly find demonic beasts only in the uninhabited regions of the wide mountains, but this kind of demonic beast would usually be incredibly powerful, so the chances that they would be countered and killed in return were even higher. The other option was the mystery realm. Because there was a limited time that the mystery realm would be open, and there was also a limit on the number of cultivators that could enter, as well as on their cultivation level, they could not create fundamental damage to their population. Where there are demonic beasts, there usually are mountain river stones, Xue Yanyu continued. Ling Han was curious, and asked, why do these demonic beasts not refine the mountain river stones? Probably because they can't, Xue Yanyu guessed. Aside from this reason, what other explanation could there be? Otherwise, with the passing of so many years, even if this whole place was scattered all over with mountain river stones, they would have been refined completely with none left. Ling Han nodded. He had presently reached the true maximum limit of the Shattering Void tier, and could break through to the mountain river tier now. Hence, he very much needed these mountain river stones to help him reach the top in a single step. The two of them walked in the direction they heard the roars of beasts coming from. In a short while, they saw that a huge rock had appeared in front of them. A demonic beast akin to a water buffalo was feasting there as it chewed on an 8-legged black deer. As if it had smelled Ling Han's and Xue Yenyu's scent, this demonic beast suddenly stood up, and turned to look in their direction. There shockingly was a single silver horn growing on its forehead, exuding cold sheen of a metal. Chapter 945. Silver-horned Mad Rhinoceros. It's a silver-horned mad rhinoceros. Xue Yanyu exclaimed in surprise. Is it very strong? Ling Han asked. His knowledge about immortal-level demonic beasts was naturally close to zero. This should be his first sight of an immortal-level demonic beast. This kind of demonic beast is on par with a 2-star genius of the same cultivation level, Xue Yanyu declared solemnly. Its power is primarily manifested by its silver horn, which is incredibly sharp, and it is extraordinarily strong by itself, with quite astonishing defenses. Its only inadequacy is that its speed is slightly low. While they were speaking, this silver-horned mad rhinoceros was also scuffing its heels. An image of a great mountain appeared behind it, but there were no rivers. This meant that its cultivation level had yet to reach the late stage of the low extreme of mountain river tier, or the image of a river would have appeared. Furthermore, looking at the size and solidity of this mountain, it should have reached the middle stage of the low extreme. Its real battle prowess is on the level of the peak of the low extreme. Xueqi compared the difference in the battle prowess of both sides. We only have a 20% chance of winning. Hey, have you included my battle prowess in the calculation? Ling Han called out. It's precisely because you are here that we only have a 20% chance of winning. If not, I could have a 30% chance, Xueqi said indifferently. Haha, are you resenting me for being in the way? That's so funny. Xueqi shook her head and replied, the chances of winning are too small. It would be best not to fight. Ling Han shook his head as well and said, too late for that. This wild bull seems like it has no plans of letting us go. Hong long long. That silver-horned mad rhinoceros was charging towards them. Its speed was indeed not too quick, but its weight was really too terrifying. Hence, when it started its mad dash, its momentum was incomparably frightening, and the ground caved in behind it. This was also because the regulations in this place were not firm enough. Otherwise, it would definitely be impossible that the low extreme of mountain river tier would have such destructive ability. This guy's actual size should be even larger than a mountain, and now that it has shrunk to this size, its charge is incredibly frightening. Xueqi explained seriously. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I will create an opportunity, and you kill it in a single blow. Are you crazy? You are only in the shattering void tier. Xueqi exclaimed in surprise. Don't forget, my defenses are something that even you can do nothing against. Ling Han said. When she remembered the first battle between them, Xueqi's face was flushed red, and she could not help but call him pervert inside her heart. A strange feeling rose up inside her, causing her to feel a kind of nostalgia, which scared her so much that she hurriedly shook her head. She did not dare think about it further. Bing! 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 The silver-horned mad rhinoceros had already raced over, and rushed towards them like a mountain. Ling Han stepped out, activated the Eye of Truth, and raised his right palm. Circulating the two mystical powers of the earth overturning seal and thunderclap ninth heaven, he suddenly clapped out with a palm aimed right at the eyes of the silver-horned mad rhinoceros. This great rhinoceros did not even have the intent to dodge. It lowered its head slightly, and then with a flick pung, its silver horn crashed into Ling Han's chest. Abruptly, he was flicked up, and then ruthlessly sent flying following the impact. Like a cannonball, Ling Han was directly sent flying into the distance. That full-powered blow of his did not even injure a hair on the great rhinoceros. Demonic beasts by nature had tough and strong skin. At least, the physique of mountain river tier was not something that could be penetrated by a shattering void tier cultivator, and this was completely different from human cultivators. Yet Xueqi took advantage of the opening to draw her sword. With a flick of her blade, she sliced towards the neck of that silver-horned mad rhinoceros. But this big guy suddenly turned around, its back facing Xueqi. Its legs abruptly bounced up, and aimed a fierce kick in her direction. Pang! Xueqi was also sent flying with the impact. However, she was similarly in the low extreme of mountain river tier, after all, and while she might be slightly inferior in terms of strength, the difference would not be too large. After turning over a dozen somersaults in the air, she finally diffused the force of the blow completely. It was merely a single blow. This huge rhinoceros had shown its full might, and had the upper hand. Ling Han got to his feet, and rubbed his chest. His clothes were naturally torn open from the impact, and there was actually a bloody mark on his chest. His skin had a slight scrape, so there was a bit of blood. No wonder it is called silver-horned. Its destructive ability is indeed shocking. Even my physique could not completely block its attack, Ling Han mumbled to himself. But if this scene was seen by others, they would definitely be so stunned that they would not dare believe this was reality. He was a mere shattering void tier cultivator, yet he could actually take a blow from a mountain river tier beast head-on, with only a bloody mark left behind. One had to know that the silver-horned mad rhinoceros was best known for its single horn, which had incredible destructive ability. Even a lion-type or tiger-type demonic beast of the same cultivation level would not dare take the might of this horn head-on, as the result would definitely be either severe injury or even death. When Xueqi saw this, she breathed a sigh of relief. Though she had long since prepared herself, her small mouth still formed an O shape. It was likely that she would not be able to get used to it this entire lifetime. Ling Han laughed long and loud, and leaping out, once again charged towards the silver-horned mad rhinoceros. "Senior sister, let's work together," he said. "Move on my word." Xueqi wanted to object at that moment. "I am obviously more powerful than you, and stronger by who knows how many times, so why am I the one to follow your lead?" But in this time and place, she could not act difficult, so she could only suppress her displeasure and settle the score with Ling Han later. Sword in hand, she charged towards the silver-horned mad rhinoceros, but did not rush to attack. Instead, she waited for Ling Han's signal. "Attack!" Ling Han shouted. Wang He, too, activated the 7-kill subduing soul technique, which rushed towards the silver-horned mad rhinoceros. This demonic beast was rushing towards Ling Han, its silver horn just about to reach Ling Han's chest. His spiritual attack was naturally unavoidable, and the attack instantly landed solidly. The rhino's legs softened, and its head slanted to one side. The silver horn missed Ling Han, and crashed to the side. Xueqi took the opportunity to rush right up to it, and slashed down on the neck of the silver-horned mad rhinoceros. Ding! A bout of sparks flashed. Though the long sword had slashed into the huge rhino's neck, it had not penetrated too deeply. Furthermore, the silver-horned mad rhinoceros immediately regained its senses with the pain, and released a furious roar. It suddenly tossed its head, and once again sent Ling Han flying. Then it charged out, so the long sword was pulled out of its body. Fresh blood continuously dripped from its neck. This demonic beast had been enraged, its size suddenly increasing by 10 times its original one, with its black body exuding endless strength. Bang! 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 The ground around it actually caved in as if a mountain range had crashed down on it. This demonic beast's mountains and rivers actually has a unique alignment. Ling Han exclaimed in surprise. The left minister had mentioned before that there were some mountain river stones that possessed unique alignments. For example, some could produce terrifying weight. And now, what this demonic beast showed was extreme weight. I think it is not that the demonic beasts here cannot refine mountain river stones, but already possess this kind of special ability by nature. Ling Han suddenly thought of this possibility. Whether that is the case or not, how should we resolve the situation now? Xueqi arrived in a single leap. Her hand wielding her sword, she looked beautiful and exuberant. However, she was the type to be elegant and graceful like water, and with the interweaving of these two kinds of bearing, she was like a fatal poison. Ling Han took another look and then said, "Just like before, I will stun it, and you take the opportunity to attack. Its physique is not tough to the extent that it is invincible." Xueqi turned her head and asked, "Can you endure it?" "Are you worrying about me now?" Ling Han countered with a smile. "Who cares if you die?" Chapter 946. Spiritual Meat. The silver-horned mad rhinoceros once again charged over. Bang! 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 It used the special ability of its mountains and rivers, and with its charge, the ground was severely compressed. Furthermore, the pieces of stones that were flying in all directions were all crushed into dust. In its field of gravity, how many were there that could maintain their usual battle prowess? As it neared, Ling Han's godly bones cracked loudly. If it was any other shattering void tier cultivator, they would definitely be compressed into a pulp. Even for a mountain river tier cultivator, if they did not use their origin power to defend themselves, they would suffer the same fate. Yet in Ling Han's case, it was merely his bones that gave a few cracks. His physique as tough as godly metal was really too powerful. Ling Han repeated the same trick. He delivered another strike with the 7-kill subduing soul technique, and caused the silver-horned mad rhinoceros to once again enter into a state of confusion, and the gravity around them also went back to normal with that. Xueqi took the opening to strike, and slashed onto the silver-horned mad rhinoceros's wound. With a new wound added onto an old one, the silver-horned mad rhinoceros was finally severely injured. Releasing a cry of agony, it charged madly in all directions, its hooves flying, bulldozing the surrounding ground into a mess. Again! Ling Han and Xueqi worked together endlessly, and after more than 10 times, finally killed this demonic beast. Thankfully, the demonic beasts here did not have much intelligence. If not, after being wounded so many times, it should have fled. With its physique and speed, The chances that it could flee successfully from them were still quite high. Xue Yanyu felt some disbelief. Such a powerful demonic beast actually died under her blade. What kind of secret technique did you use that could actually stun the silver-horned mad rhinoceros? Xue Yanyu asked with surprise. If that had not been the case, how could she have possibly succeeded so easily? Hee hee. Ling Han merely smiled, but did not want to reveal his trump card. Xue Yanyu could not help but feel annoyed. Still, when she remembered that the two of them were merely pretend lovers, what position was she in to demand Ling Han to tell her about his trump card? If it wasn't for the fact that Ling Han did not want to expose the secret of the Black Tower, he could directly draw the silver-horned mad rhinoceros into the Black Tower after it had lost consciousness. That way, he would be able to easily decide the life and death of this immortal-level demonic beast. Ling Han's abilities were not enough, so Xue Yanyu cut open the body of the silver-horned mad rhinoceros with her sword. After searching a while, she finally pulled out a piece of meat that was only about the size of the pinky finger. Unlike other meat, this piece of meat was completely snow-white. Furthermore, it had a sweet scent, and weighed only about 50 grams at most. Spiritual meat. The very most valuable object in a demonic beast. For cultivators, it was extremely nutritious as it could greatly boost their cultivation and replenish their stamina. Xue Yanyu sawed off that silver horn. Even though this demonic beast was huge, the only really valuable objects were the spiritual meat as well as that silver horn. I heard that if the horn of a rhino is ground to powder, consuming it would boost the male sex drive. It can't be that you're planning to make me take it as a tonic, right? Ling Han remarked suddenly. Xue Yanyu instantly went berserk, and began to chase Ling Han around, brandishing her sword with killing intent. After much hassle, he finally calmed her down. The two began to search thoroughly again, but did not find any mountain river stones in the vicinity. So, in the end, what does a mountain river stone look like? Ling Han asked. It glows slightly, and will be recognizable with a single look, Xue Yanyu said. They did not immediately consume the spiritual meat, but kept it instead. Refining spiritual meat would need a lot of time, but they had no idea how long they would be able to stay here. Hence, they naturally had to make as much of the time as possible to find mountain river stones, and try their best to hunt demonic beasts to harvest more spiritual meat. Of course, that piece of godly metal was also one of their targets. If it had been just Ling Han alone, he would definitely have lost his way, with no idea where he was supposed to go, but now that Xue Yanyu was here, she had a map that had been drawn by uncountable generations of people who had entered into the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm. It was very detailed. Thus, they did not worry that they would be running around for no reason. With this special weapon of Ling Han's, they swept through all on their way, killing a great many powerful demonic beasts, and also harvesting multiple pieces of spiritual meat, which Xue Yanyu was overjoyed at. She had not thought that their harvest would actually be so bountiful. Unfortunately, they had still not spotted a single mountain river stone. This was very normal. How could the extraordinary stones be so easily found? Of course, they were not invincible. If they encountered a demonic beast in the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, they could only choose to flee. Ling Han's 7-kill subduing soul technique was completely ineffective on them. At most, it could only cause a target of this level a slight piercing pain. After a whole 3 days, a ravine appeared in front of them. This was the path that they had to pass through to get to the Crimson Lake. They chose that place for their next stop as it was definite that there would be mountain river stones there. On both sides, there were extraordinarily steep mountains, which were fraught with danger, and could not possibly be climbed. Hence, they would have to pass through this ravine. However, this ravine was not all that safe. It was only relatively safe in comparison. If one wanted to be truly safe, he should not leave home at all. According to rumors, the most dangerous creature in this ravine is a type of demonic tree. Usually, it pretends to be motionless, but when prey passes by, it will suddenly become hostile. The moment you become entangled in its branches, even a cultivator at the peak of the low extreme would find it very difficult to struggle free, Xue Yanyu explained. The Xue clan is a 5th-tier clan at the very least, so your clan should have prepared something for you, right? Ling Han asked. Xue Yanyu nodded, and said, flame bullets, which possess great destructive effect on that demonic tree. However, there are only 3. Are there any treasures on the demonic tree? Ling Han asked in high spirits. Xue Yanyu rolled her eyes and said, "There has never been anyone that dared to bear any intentions on this ravine. The faster they got through, the better. And you still plan to reap a good harvest here?" "Can't I?" Ling Han felt slightly disappointed. Xue Yanyu shook her head. "There isn't any spiritual meat on the demonic tree. At most, its trunk is extremely hard, and could be used to forge a weapon, but it would not be very effective, as it could be overcome by flames, so there is an obvious weakness." "Then forget it. Let's just quickly pass through." Ling Han had lost all interest. The pair walked into the ravine. This place was so quiet it was a bit scary. They could not hear any chirping of insects or animal cries. It was like a dead ravine, and the silence would make one shiver in trepidation. There was no obvious path in the ravine, so they walked under the trees. The trees here were not very tall, the tallest being only about 30 meters tall. There was absolutely no way they could compare to the trees outside, which were easily over 3,000 meters tall. Once they walked further, they could see there were even vines covered with sharp black thorns growing beneath these trees. These thorns were extremely sharp. If one did not actively use origin power to defend himself, they could easily penetrate the skin. Furthermore, they were covered with poison, which could practically turn their prey into a pool of blood in an instant to be absorbed as nutrition by the vines. The only thing remaining would be a pile of bones. Advancing further ahead would be difficult as they would need to open up a new path. There was nothing else that could be done. Who asked them to be the first here? The two of them began slicing apart the vines, but did not set them on fire, because it was useless even if they did. Ordinary flames could not possibly damage these vines. It was necessary to have a cultivator that had especially cultivated in a fire element secret technique, and his cultivation level had to reach the mountain river tier at least. This was because this was the immortal realm, and a shattering void tier cultivator would really not be able to cause much of a ripple here, being equivalent to immortal in the small world. After quite some time, the sound of movement was heard from behind them. They turned to take a look. It looked like someone else had come. "Great. More hands mean more effort. If we open the path together, we can increase the speed of our advance," Ling Han said. "Careful, it is difficult to guess the hearts of others," Xue Yanyu reminded. Ling Han nodded and said, "If others do not offend me, neither will I offend others. If they bear malicious intent, then I will definitely make them regret that fact." Chapter 947. Wounding an Immortal. The two of you were really quite fast. From the opposite side, 3 people walked over. They were all men. 2 of them were very young, but both were in the low extreme of the mountain river tier, whereas the third one was an old man exuding a slightly frightening aura. This mystery realm only placed a limit on cultivation level, and not on age. Hence, whether one could enter or not would have no relation to his or her talent. There were some who were not very talented, and already reached their limit by forcibly advancing into the immortal level. For their whole lives, they would only be capable of stagnating in the low extreme. These people naturally did not have much potential to be nurtured. However, because of the entry restrictions of the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm, they became useful. They spent their whole lives on this cultivation level, and had also thus cultivated the low extreme to the maximum, so their battle prowess was quite frightening. Even if their talent was far from reaching the extent of 1-star or 2-star geniuses, with a concentration of countless times some, had even taken some secret medicines as well. They sacrificed the possibility of raising their cultivation level further to attain a greater battle prowess in a battle of the same level. In the first place, they did not have any more room for improvement, so it wasn't much of a loss. They were obviously very ordinary, yet it was possible that they would exhibit battle prowess on the level of 3, or even 4-star geniuses. It was all for the sake of this one time every 10 years, to show their capabilities in this kind of mystery realm. Obviously, this old man was such an example. He was obviously only in the low extreme of mountain river tier, yet the aura he exuded was extremely powerful, far surpassing his actual cultivation level. Xue Yanyu's heart clenched. In the present situation, the opposite side numbered more than theirs. The moment they started fighting, their side would definitely be at a great disadvantage. Thankfully, Ling Han was a secret weapon. Who would have imagined that a mere shattering void tier cultivator would pose a threat to a mountain river tier elite? She asked calmly, "Are the 3 of you not going to join us in opening the path? Our time here is limited. No one wants to go home empty-handed, right?" The trio before them smiled, and drew out their respective weapons to begin opening a new path. "We came from the Lang clan of Eternity Sky. May I ask how I should address you, fairy?" One of the young men looked at Xue Yenyu's alluring figure, his eyes flickering with an odd light. "Chaotic Stars Majestic." Xiao. Xue Yenyu had just opened her mouth when she saw the three of them move simultaneously, directing an attack towards her. The three of them had obviously long come to an understanding as they moved at almost the same time. In their minds, naturally, only Xue Yenyu was a possible threat to them. They had directly overlooked that brat in the Shattering Void tier. However, though their attacks were fierce, they avoided Xue Yenyu's vital points. It was obvious that this attack was only meant to subdue her, and not to kill her. This act was not out of kindness, but rather possessed a more malicious intent behind it. Xue Yenyu's beautiful face instantly froze over, and she rebuked, "Despicable!" She brandished her sword in a flash, and a cold light flashed over, abruptly freezing the air. The surrounding temperature dropped drastically. She had long since been on her guard. How could she possibly trust a few people that she had never seen before? But it was a battle of 3 versus 1, and the old man was frighteningly powerful, with battle prowess that was almost on the level of a 4-star genius. As he struck out with a saber, golden light shone blindingly as if his blade could split open the heavens and earth itself, causing one to feel a shiver that could not be resisted. "Have the three of you forgotten me?" Ling Han asked, smiling, and directly shot out an attack with the 7-kill subduing soul technique. A young man's figure instantly paused as he was stunned. Ling Han took the chance to strike with his sword, and slashed right down on his head. Pooh! A fountain of blood gushed out, making for a very sad yet beautiful scene. Who would have imagined that a Shattering Void tier cultivator would possess such a strong ability? The remaining 2 on the opposite side were stunned. Ding ding. Xue Yenyu's sword swept past, exchanging a blow with them. Pang! Xue Yenyu was sent flying with the impact. That old man was too strong. Even if he was slightly distracted, he could not be stopped. Thankfully, she made use of being sent flying to disperse the power of the blow she took as much as possible. Though her beautiful face was a little pale, she was mostly unharmed. Ah! The wounded young man screamed horribly. He had already snapped back to his senses, and the great pain caused him to call out uncontrollably. He felt as if his head was about to fall off his shoulders. An immortal-level cultivator is really difficult to kill. Ling Han exclaimed in his heart. Though his skin had been very easily split open, his bones had been refined to become extremely hard. Though it was still far from the level of godly metal, it was still not something that could be split apart with just one strike from him. What a real pity. Ziwei, what is going on here? The other 2 asked, their expressions stunned. This was extremely shocking. The other was merely in the Shattering Void tier, yet was capable of wounding an immortal, and had even nearly killed him. He has learnt a secret technique that attacks my spirit directly, causing me to sink into a state of confusion, the wounded young man told them after a slight period of recollection. A spiritual secret technique, the other 2 people exclaimed in surprise. At first, they looked stunned, but it was quickly followed by ecstasy. Everyone knew that though immortals focused on cultivating their spirits, the main purpose for strengthening one's spirit was so that their spirits would not be so easily killed. From another aspect, the stronger the spirit, the more they would be able to draw upon the regulations of heaven and earth to boost their own battle prowess. However, the spirit itself actually played no part in direct attack. Yet, there were techniques in this world that could make the spirit itself into a weapon that could attack another, and kill others in a way that could not be detected. This was known as a spiritual secret technique. However, spiritual secret techniques were extremely rare, and they were all held by a few extremely powerful forces. They would definitely not be taught to outsiders. They would not even teach them to the descendants of their daughters most of the time, unless they were really extremely talented. Furthermore, their fathers had to marry into the clan. Now that they had discovered that Ling Han had a spiritual secret technique, how could they not be overjoyed? They would snatch and take it for themselves. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "You both look ugly, but you have beautiful dreams." Humph, so what if you possess a spiritual secret technique? I have cultivated my spirit for several dozen thousand years. As long as I defend myself fully, how would you be able to get an opportunity to use your technique? The old man moved, his long saber striking out, aimed directly at Ling Han's chest. He wanted to kill Ling Han so he could pluck out his memories directly to obtain this secret technique. There was completely no need to leave him alive. Elder Yang, what need is there for you to move against a mere shattering void tier cultivator? Leave it to me. The unwounded young man made his move as well, wanting to be the one to take Ling Han's life. The plucking of another's soul could be done only once. After the soul was plucked, the teacher would naturally be completely useless. But who would be able to guarantee that the old man would share the technique with others after he had taken it? Hence, he could only really relax when it was he himself that got a hold of the technique. The two of them both used deadly techniques so that each could be the first to kill Ling Han and snatch away his body from each other, then pluck out his soul while his body was still fresh to steal his technique. Xue Yanyu, meanwhile, had absolutely no intention of coming to his rescue. Instead, brandishing her sword, she slashed out at the wounded young man. Though this person had not been killed by a single strike, he had still suffered a severe injury. He was presently circulating his cultivation technique to allow the wound to heal. Otherwise, if his neck was to be completely severed, then he would not even be able to take alchemical pills. Xue Yanyu charged over, and the man could only parry her strikes with a single arm. However, the moment he was engaged in battle, he would have to distribute some part of his origin power, and his broken neck would instantly be pouring out blood like crazy. "Help me! Help me!" he called out quickly. But how could it be that the remaining two would still bother with him? Their eyes were completely focused on Ling Han. The value of a spiritual secret technique was too high. It was even more valuable than a mountain river stone. After all, they could enter this place once every decade, and in the case of the low extreme of mountain river tier, the majority had to remain on this level a few 100,000 years, so there was naturally no need for a rush. Pang! Pang! The two elites of mountain river tier made their moves, which naturally landed solidly on Ling Han. Chapter 948. Powerfully matching two great elites of mountain river tier. The old man's saber slashed down onto Ling Han's neck from the left, while the young man's sword stabbed into Ling Han's lower abdomen from the right. Their attacks landed on Ling Han at about the same time. Logically, Ling Han should have been split apart into 3 pieces. These were attacks from mountain river tier elites, so how could a mere shattering void tier cultivator hope to block them? However, Ling Han's physique was on the level of a monster. As the saber and slash struck simultaneously, it just so happened 2 flows of energy came from completely opposite directions and crashed into him, hence cancelling each other out. Otherwise, whether it was the saber slash or the sword strike that Ling Han took head-on, he would have been immediately sent flying. Ah! The young man released a scream of pain, the web between his thumb and forefinger splitting open. The present Ling Han was a piece of godly metal. Hence, when the two of them struck simultaneously on a piece of godly metal, it was equivalent to the both of them exchanging a blow with each other. The old man was probably comparable to a 4-star genius, so his talent was naturally completely superior to the young man's. An attack that met force with force naturally resulted him being on the losing side. Pooh! The old man was so stunned his eyeballs were almost popping out of their sockets, his mouth wide open. Ling Han did not even need the 7-kill subduing soul technique, and he was already stunned. Monster. An absolute monster. The simultaneous strikes of 2 great elites of the mountain river tier did not even manage to harm a hair on his head. On the other hand, one of them even had the web between his thumb and forefinger torn open. Was this a dream? Otherwise, how could something so unbelievable happen? Ling Han gritted his teeth, feeling displeased. He was not a sandbag, so why should he stand there and keep letting others hit him? Without entering into the mountain river tier, it was impossible. He took the chance to attack, and with the landing of a spiritual attack, the young man abruptly became stunned. That scene earlier had too much of an impact on him, so he had forgotten to guard his divine sense. How dare you! The old man came back to his senses. Raising his blade once more, he slashed out at Ling Han again. His abilities were stronger than Ling Han's by who knew how many times. Though he started later, the saber's blade instantly caught up to Ling Han's back, and his slash landed heavily. Pang! Ling Han was instantly sent flying. His strength was ultimately incomparable to the mountain river tier, after all. He flew back more than 1,000 meters away before finally stopping. Thankfully, he had not crashed in the direction of the deeper parts of the ravine. Otherwise, he would have possibly been pierced by the vines. However, it was not certain they could do it, either. His physique was too tough, so perhaps even those sharp thorns would have no effect on him. The old man then turned to charge at Xueqi. The other young man was already approaching a state of crisis. After all, Xueqi was a genuine mountain river tier cultivator. Furthermore, she was a 2-star genius, so how could she be underestimated? Ling Han got back up and drew out a bow. The annihilating dragon star arrow was circulating, and there were images of suns, moons, and stars flickering in his eyes. A feeling of ice rose up in all 3 members of the Lang clan at the same time, and none of them actually dared make any rash moves. Their instinct told them that if they were not careful, they could possibly die. A shattering void tier cultivator. They all looked at Ling Han, all of them wearing an expression of shock at how unfathomable this was. What kind of archery technique is this? He is obviously just a shattering void tier cultivator, yet he gives off a threatening feeling for me? That arrow must have been forged from godly metal. Only the wounded young man did not let out an exclamation of shock at all. That was because Xueqi had been chasing him down all this time, seeming like she would not rest until she killed him. Ling Han smiled slightly. Mystical powers were inherited from the immortal realm. Though they were all known as mystical powers in the small world, in the immortal realm, there definitely had to be a ranking system for them. However, if one's cultivation level was too low, then he would not be able to release the full might of the mystical power. Hence, the level of the mystical power itself was naturally meaningless. But it was different now. He was just 1 step away from advancing into immortal level, and the might of his mystical powers had also experienced an obvious boost. The annihilating dragon star arrow was the strongest among his mystical powers, and its might was not just a little bit stronger than the rest. After all, it was a secret technique that was passed down from an immortal. Ling Han only pulled the bowstring, but did not shoot, exerting full pressure on the old and young duo. His purpose was very simple, and that was to drag the time out so Xueqi could kill that wounded young man. Injuring all of a man's fingers was not as effective as chopping off one. The other 2 members of the Lang clan also understood this logic clearly. They exchanged a look before suddenly shooting off into opposite directions, and charged back at Ling Han. Which one were you going to shoot? With your abilities of the Shattering Void tier, you would only be able to shoot 1 arrow before they could get near enough, and would definitely be incapable of shooting a second one. Ling Han laughed, his figure retreating backwards. His task had been to cause a delay in the first place. However, no matter how fast he retreated, he could not match the speed of 2 elites in the mountain river tier, and the 2 once again struck out with their sword and saber. Haven't you learnt your lesson? Ling Han put away his bow, his hands stretching out to grab at the saber and sword. This, in the eyes of others, would be an action that courted death, but Ling Han's using it was a smart move. He was going to once more manipulate these 2 members of the Lang clan and let them massacre one another. Humph! The old man took the initiative to change his attack. He struck downwards with his saber in a slash, whilst the young man maintained the course of his sword strike. In this way, even if they both struck Ling Han at the same time, they would not be pushed back due to another opposing force. Pang! Ling Han took these 2 blows head-on, and was instantly sent flying once more. This is really displeasing, he mumbled. In the small world, when had he ever been so pitiful that he was unable to fight back in the slightest when he was being pummeled by others? But the 2 members of the Lang clan were even more depressed than he was. Were you really in the shattering void tier? How could you take a hit better than even them? One had to know that even if they were the ones being on the receiving end of attacks from 2 elites of the same cultivation level like this, they would have to throw up 1 or 2 mouthfuls of blood at the very least, right? Ling Han did not come out completely unscathed either. After all, the duo's weapons were both forged from level 1 godly metal. After multiple attacks, a few bloody marks finally appeared on his body. Hey, you 2 are really too cruel. Did you see? I'm injured, Ling Han said deliberately. The 2 members of the Lang clan were almost mad with fury. This bastard was definitely showing off. Hee, we did not have any animosity between us initially, so what need is there for a battle to the death? The old man took the initiative to put away his saber, and said smilingly, "This is only a misunderstanding. Let us just go our separate ways like this, all right?
Misunderstanding your sister.
Ling Han gave him the middle finger. A muscle in the old man's cheek twitched.
He had also seen that the injured young man was not going to last much longer, and thus thought of first halting the battle and saving him.
Then, he would think of a way to deal with this young couple. Ling Han was really too strange. He had to get a hold of his secrets. Their value even exceeded the mystery realm itself. He gave a cold humph, and drew his saber once more. He said, "Do you plan to force us to act?"
Wretch!
Ling Han only spat out this word.
The old man pondered for a moment and said, "I will block him."
"You go and assist Ziwei."
"Yes." The young man did not argue any more.
Ling Han was practically an unkillable monster. He naturally had no intention to become the first to kill Ling Han and pluck out his soul any longer. He immediately charged towards Shui Yanyu. Otherwise, it was highly possible his companion would die. Ling Han smirked, and drew out another arrow.
"Don't even think about it."
The old man, brandishing his saber, delivered a slash. 7 kills subduing soul technique. Ling Han delivered a spiritual attack towards the old man. The old man had obviously ensured his divine sense was closely defended, but he still experienced a slight moment of inattention. This bit of time was not enough to allow Ling Han to cause him damage, yet it did allow Ling Han to increase the distance. His arrow already notched. Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. Chapter 949. A Major Victory.
Xiao, a black arrow immediately transformed into a flow of light, and shot towards the back of that young man.
How could the young man have imagined that Ling Han would still manage to make a move on him even with the old man impeding him? Furthermore, this arrow was really too fast. It had practically reached the standard of the low extreme of the mountain river tier.
"Elder Yong," the young man roared in anger.
"You did it on purpose, didn't you?" He surely wanted them to die so he could take that spiritual secret technique for himself. He forcibly turned back around, and delivered a sword strike. Yet Ling Han had used 2 mystical powers in this arrow.
The Eye of Truth had long since spotted the place where his defenses were the weakest, and added with the fact that the arrow that had been shot was forged from level 1 godly metal. How sharp would it be?
Xiao, the black arrow pierced through the image of his sword strike, and with a pu, shot right into his body. Thanks to the fact that he managed to lean to the side in the nick of time, the arrow just missed the vital point, his heart. This arrow instead pierced into his shoulder, creating a shower of blood.
Ah!
The young man's expression changed drastically. There are patterns to eliminate immortals on this arrow. Pang! His shoulder suddenly exploded, and he directly lost the other half of his body. The vitality of immortals was too strong. This had not killed him.
The young man swayed slightly, and hurriedly drew out a bottle of liquid, pouring it down on his own body.
Suddenly, a green-colored light appeared, and his body actually began recovering quickly. Still, his heart ached painfully. This was a divine fluid that his clan had bestowed on him to save his life in a crisis. Not only was it extremely limited, he could only use it once in his entire lifetime. Using it a second time would have no effect. This meant that if he met with any life-threatening danger in the mystery realm again, he would not have another chance to survive. But the divine fluid did quickly take effect. The destroyed half of his body was currently regrowing blood and flesh at an amazing speed. Just at this moment, multiple black shapes shot towards him as if they were sharp arrows. In these circumstances, the young man had only focused on the 2 great threats posed by Ling Han and Shui Yanyu. How could he have imagined that there would be a third party in this battle? He was completely unguarded, and was instantly tightly wrapped around by those black shapes. Upon another look, these were multiple branches, and they originated from a great tree in the ravine. The demonic tree.
Ah!
The young man screamed out horribly. Those branches stabbed into his wound, and were endlessly absorbing his life energy. The abilities of this demonic tree were extremely frightening in the first place, and even if he had been in his prime condition, he would have to pay a great price to be able to struggle free. Now that he was severely wounded, how could he have any way to resist? His body immediately wilted at a visibly fast pace. That was because his blood and flesh had been sucked out by the demonic tree. The vitality and life energy of a cultivator was inside these substances.
Demonic tree, how dare you?
The old man from the Lang clan could no longer bother with Ling Han, and hurriedly delivered a slash with his saber. He was really very strong. It did not have any effect on Ling Han, because Ling Han's physique was really too inhuman, but the demonic tree was not Ling Han, and it could not help but loosen its branches and retreat after suffering a few slashes. Its roots were in the depths of the ravine, and it was there that its battle prowess was the strongest. But the young man had received a severe injury in the first place, and leeched by the demonic tree. He had practically become a dried corpse. Even if he was not dead yet, he was not far from it. Ah! The old man had just picked the young man up when he heard a horrible cry behind him. He turned around, and only saw that Xue Yanyu pierced straight through the other young man's heart. That was definitely complete death. The old man was both enraged, his whole body trembling with the emotion. This result was definitely not within his expectations. The enemy was obviously only a mountain river tier cultivator and a shattering void tier cultivator, so how was it that the tables had turned, and it was them that had suffered serious damage? His talent was not outstanding. Advancing into the mountain river tier had already expended any potential that he possessed. However, the clan still spared no expense and gave him a great many mountain river stones to refine. Their purpose was to make him into an invincible existence in the low extreme, so that he could obtain even more mountain river stones for the clan. In the last 10,000 years he had indeed done so, and had also been very successful, but this time, his losses were too big. Out of 2 heirs with boundless prospects from the Lang clan, one was dead, and even if the other was not, he was crippled. How was he going to explain this to the clan? His eyes spewed fire and he shouted loudly, "You all deserve to die." Ling Han shook his head and said, "The evils we bring on ourselves are the hardest to bear." The old man tossed the young man onto the ground. The latter was already crippled, and there was no meaning in bringing him back to the clan. The priority now was vengeance. Now that he had nothing to worry about, with his battle prowess of a 4-star genius, even if he could not kill this brat, how could it be that this woman would also be as difficult to kill? Ling Han stood in front of Xue Yanyu with a smile and said, "See, you still need me to protect you." Xue Yanyu was very speechless, but who asked this guy to be such a monster that he could not be treated like a shattering void tier cultivator at all? She could not help but wonder when Ling Han entered into the mountain river tier, what kind of a monster would he be? "I too want to know how strong I'll be when I become a mountain river tier cultivator," Ling Han remarked with a nod of his head. "You know what I am thinking about?" Xue Yanyu asked in surprise. "It's all written on your face." The old man from the Lang clan roared angrily, "Do you two think I am not here?" Brandishing his saber, he charged over. Ling Han laughed and said, "Come, let us work together just like we did before." N. Xue Yanyu nodded. Previously, she and Ling Han had worked together to kill a great many demonic beasts whose battle prowess was superior to theirs. Bing! 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 They engaged in a furious battle. The old man from the Lang clan was indeed very mighty. After he had closed the distance so that there was no way to exhibit the full might of the annihilating dragon star arrow, Ling Han could only affect him slightly with his 7-kill subduing soul technique, though the effects were not obvious. The old man had been cultivating for several dozen thousand years, so his spirit was very strong, and it was very difficult to influence. Additionally, he focused on attacking Xue Yanyu. With his stronger battle prowess, he battled at close quarters with Xue Yanyu, so even if Ling Han managed to pull out the distance, he would not dare to activate the annihilating dragon star arrow, as the possibility of him accidentally hitting Xue Yanyu was extremely high. With the high pressure exerted by the old man, Xue Yanyu immediately looked like she was struggling. Her battle prowess was in the late stage of the low extreme, but the old man was equivalent to being at the peak of the medium extreme. This gap was not just a little small. In the Immortal level, no one could afford being inferior by a mere sub-level. What more when the gap between them was more than a minor tier? Merely after over 100 moves, Xue Yanyu was wounded. Now, it was only a light injury, but it would very soon become a severe injury, and would finally lead to her tragic death. If the old man had possessed any extremely filthy thoughts previously, he now only had one intention, and that was to kill Xue Yanyu. At least, he could then take half of his revenge. Ling Han's brow frowned, and he finally came to a decision. He could not bring himself to sit by and watch as Xue Yanyu died in battle. 7-kill subduing soul technique.
With the spiritual attack, the old man was briefly stunned. This could only resolve Xue Yenyu's dangerous situation temporarily. If that had not been the case, how could she have been able to block over 100 moves from the old man? Ling Han wrapped his divine sense around the old man, and directly drew him into the Black Tower. Xue Yenyu was just about to slash out with her sword, yet suddenly realized that she had lost her target. She could not help but gape widely in shock and asked, Where has he gone? Could this old man also be capable of instant teleportation? Chapter 950. Not Understanding a Woman's Heart. Xue Yenyu did not dare to let her guard down in the slightest. An enemy that was capable of instant teleportation was too terrifying. Be careful, she advised Ling Han. Ling Han could not help but smile as he said, Be careful of what? That old man. Xue Yenyu was a little driven mad. Didn't you see that a human being had suddenly disappeared? Oh, him. Ling Han scratched his head, and then spread out his hands in front of him. It should be impossible that he would reappear. You? Xue Yenyu suddenly realized. You drew him into the spatial god tool? You finally realized. Ling Han sighed. Xue Yenyu shook her head and said, No, a spatial god tool should only be capable of storage. If others were not willing to enter, could you still force them to? With the abilities of that old man, it is impossible that you would be able to force him in. Furthermore, it has already been so long, so no matter what, he should have already fought his way out by now. My spatial god tool is a little different. Even it was a great elite of the heavenly body tier that entered, whether they stand or kneel would depend on my mood, Ling Han said, smiling. Xue Yenyu looked at Ling Han in astonishment. This was too shocking. It also meant that even if the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire entered into this spatial god tool, her life or death would be in Ling Han's hands as well. Hiss, had this guy really come from a small world? What is it? Struck dumb by my handsomeness? Ling Han asked with a laugh. Xue Yenyu's eyes turned, and then she said suddenly, We have encountered so many demonic beasts before. You could have actually drawn them into your spatial god tool easily, right? Ling Han hummed. It wasn't a very good thing for a woman to be too clever. Xue Yenyu was instantly angered. There were a good few times that I was almost heavily injured. It is because you did not trust me, so you did not use your spatial god tool. Ling Han laughed and said, Well, I have still trusted you now, haven't I? Otherwise, I could just watch as you get yourself killed by that old man, couldn't I? You are merely twisting the facts. In any case, you just did not trust me. Xue Yenyu was still displeased. Ling Han shrugged with a smile and said, Senior sister, have you gone too deeply into the act? We are only pretend lovers, but we have not really done anything like handing our hearts to one another. Xue Yenyu's beautiful face turned ashen, and she slashed her sword at the vines in front of her, biting tightly down on her lip. Were his words too heavy? Ling Han wondered. Still, he and this senior sister Xue were indeed merely pretending to be lovers. Aside from that, they did not have any deep relations. When it came to a secret as huge as the spatial god tool, how could he easily reveal it to another person? If it was a decisive and ruthless man like Rain Emperor, he might have already killed Xue Yenyu to ensure this secret remained a secret. Him stepping out to save her was already his heart being soft, but why did it now seem like he was someone who had done something wrong? Women were really baffling. Ling Han first dealt with the corpses of the two young people of the Lang clan, and then headed to help Xue Yenyu slash at the vines. Stay far away from me, Xue Yenyu said, her expression icy. This time, Ling Han did not obey. Instead, he quietly continued to cut away at the vines. Thick-skinned, Xue Yenyu spat, but her expression took a turn for the better. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief. It looked like the rain was over, and the sky was beginning to clear one. After another while, more people came from behind them. However, this time, they were from the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, and knew Xue Yenyu. All of them worked together, and their progress instantly sped up considerably. From behind them, more and more people came. Now that there were a lot of people, it was hard for fights to start because no one had absolute confidence that they could kill anyone else. If they rashly started a fight, it might possibly result in neither side winning,
and both sides coming off worse. Moreover, everyone had come here for the mountain river stones. If they wanted a fight, they could get on the battlefield. There had never been an end to the minor scuffles between the three great majestic empires. When the numbers reached over 100, it became an indestructible force. They swept aside all obstacles in their way, and even the demonic tree could only uproot its roots and flee, not daring to chance a battle. From this aspect, the tree that lacked a brain was, on the contrary, smarter than demonic beasts, which would make others click their tongues in amazement. After leaving the ravine, this temporary alliance was immediately disbanded. Everyone used their motion techniques and went their own way. No one had a feeling of camaraderie brought about by battling side by side. To form a group with people who had no relation to them was too dangerous. Putting aside complete strangers, they might not be able to really trust even the people that had originated from the same clan. In truth, Ling Han and Xue Yanyu were quite unique. They were obviously pretend lovers, yet had traveled together for such a long way, and a kind of mutual understanding had developed between them. Since he had already made known a little of the abilities of the Black Tower to Xue Yanyu, Ling Han did not hide this card any further on the rest of their way. When they encountered demonic beasts in the mountain river tier, he would directly act. He would first strike them unconscious, and then draw them into the Black Toe eras easy as a pie. But this was only limited to the low extreme. If they encountered those in the medium extreme, even Ling Han could do nothing, and they would have to retreat in defeat. Even so, their harvest was still amazing. In a short 2 days, they had killed or captured over 100 demonic beasts, which was something that made Xue Yanyu feel like she couldn't believe her own eyes. Putting aside mountain river stones, the spiritual meat was already extremely valuable. And they finally obtained a mountain river stone as well. It was a stone completely dark green in color. It looked slightly translucent, and holding it in one's hand would give them a refreshing feeling. It was indeed extraordinary, and could be recognized with a single look. Xue Yanyu tossed the mountain river stone over to Ling Han, and said, "Hurry up and refine it. Once you form your mountains and rivers, you will truly possess the ability to move around in this place." Ling Han nodded. He did not need to advance very far in the mountain river tier. The most important thing now was to form his mountains and rivers, and become a cultivator of the immortal level. Unfortunately, this mountain river stone did not possess any special trait. "Halt!" A shout rang out from ahead of them, and they saw 2 groups of people race out from the side. The group in front was a group of 3, and the group behind was a group of 7. Obviously, one group was in flight, whilst the other group was chasing them down. "Leave the mountain river stone, and we can spare your lives," the group of 7 called out. The group of 3 in front turned a deaf ear. This was really a joke. They were here for the mountain river stone, so they would naturally not compromise so easily. They gritted their teeth, and one of them drew out a pair of wings, which he then pressed down on his back. 2 giant 9-meter-long wings actually spread out from his back. The other 2 grabbed hold of his thighs, and as the giant wings flapped, they instantly flew into the sky. In the immortal realm, even mountain river tier cultivators did not possess the ability of flight, unless they were of a specific race that possessed wings. Otherwise they could only make use of flight god tools. When the 7 behind them saw this, they all stopped weakly. This naturally exceeded the bounds of their control. In truth, the 3 people in front had initially not planned to use this treasure. It was completely because they had spotted Ling Han and Xue Yanyu, and were thus afraid that they would be trapped in a pincer attack from the front and back. Hence, enduring much heartache, they used this treasured item. This was something that had a limited number of uses, so it was indeed a heartache. When the eyes of the group of 7 swept over Ling Han and Xue Yanyu, they all smirked coldly. "So the mountain river stone is with the 2 of you. Hand it over." "It's something that we've only managed to obtain after much painstaking effort, and was then stolen by the 3 people just now. The 2 of you had better hand the item over. This is not something that belongs to you," the group of 7 called out. Xue Yanyu and Ling Han exchanged a glance, and their only thought was that this group of 7 was really quite shameless. Weren't they simply spewing lies right in front of them? Chapter 951. Separate. Ling Han chuckled and asked, "What if we don't?" He had completely no intention of arguing whom the mountain river stone belonged to exactly. This was completely obvious. The other side simply wanted to take theirs.
You're not going to hand it over?
The 7 smirked coldly. Was there need to deliberate on that issue further?
This woman is really quite pretty. If we kill her, it's a real pity. Hee hee, then we'll have our fun first before we kill her.
It's too bad we couldn't possibly bring her out of the mystery realm. Otherwise, it would have been a real pity to kill her. They stared at Xue Yanyu, completely making no effort to hide the lust in their eyes.
In their eyes, it was a fight of 7 elites of Mountain River tier against a single Mountain River tier and a shattering Void tier cultivator, so they were naturally certain of victory, and had no doubt about it.
Though the group of 3 managed to escape, wasn't there still another Mountain River stone here? There was also a captivating beauty. This meant they profited. The more they looked at Xue Yanyu, the more their hearts fluttered. They became impatient, wanting nothing more than to leap over and snatch her away.
Hey. Swallow down your saliva, she is my wife, though only temporarily, Ling Han said with a smile, leaping out and taking the initiative to strike. You are courting death.
One of them laughed coldly, and casually struck out a palm strike at Ling Han. Meanwhile, the other 6 paid absolutely no attention to them. In their eyes, this was naturally a matter of an instant kill. They were focused on Xue Yanyu. The more they looked at this captivating beauty, the more their hearts fluttered. 7 kills subduing soul technique, draw in. Ling Han was more and more accustomed to using these 2 moves, and in an instant, the battle was decided. The remaining 6 looked astonished at this. Right in front of their eyes, their companion had actually disappeared into thin air in an incredibly bizarre manner. Were they seeing things? What kind of trick did you use? Where did he go? They exclaimed in harsh voices. Is there any need to ask? Ling Han smirked coldly.
Daring to have thoughts about my wife, the natural consequence is to be killed without pardon.
Xue Yanyu's beautiful face flushed, but she realized that she seemed to have less and less resistance towards the address wife, as she was actually not as angry as she used to be.
Kill.
The 6 made their move at the same time. Though the moves Ling Han showed were very bizarre, they believed more in their own abilities. How could it be that 6 Mountain River tier cultivators were still insufficient to deal with a shattering Void tier cultivator? Bang! 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 Ling Han was instantly hit. He naturally was not a match for a Mountain River tier opponent, and was sent flying with a barrage of blows. But when he landed back on the ground, he was actually completely unharmed.
This!
The 6 of them gaped in shock. No matter what, they could not accept this reality. Ling Han moved his muscles and bones and said, Not bad, not bad. Though the impact is still not that great, there is at least some feeling. The 6 people were almost driven mad by their fury. Did he think they were giving him a massage? But how could this man's defenses possibly be so tough? It had practically reached a frightening extent. Ling Han countered, and delivered another strike with the 7-kill subduing soul technique. However, this time, a flash of lightning actually passed on the forehead of his target, which blocked his spiritual attack.
A spiritual secret technique. The man's eyes immediately lit up. I get it now.
Just now, you used your spiritual secret technique to confuse Tuhe's senses, and caused him to disappear with some kind of method. Haha, you didn't know that I have cultivated a secret technique so that my spirit is incredibly firm? Could it be a spatial god tool? Another man questioned. That's right. It must be a spatial god tool. Otherwise, it would be impossible that a real live human being disappeared without a trace. None of the 6 were idiots. With one word here and another there, they had pieced the truth together. Their eyes became heated. According to legends, spatial god tools could only be forged by ultimate elites of the Genesis tier because the inside of the god tool could accommodate living beings. It could be claimed to be a world of its own, so, naturally, only ultimate elites of Genesis tier had the ability to do so. The value of this was who knew how many times higher than a Mountain River stones. Furthermore, there was still a spiritual secret technique. Fuck, this brat was a real piece of treasure. The eyes of the 6 burned, and the eyes they looked at Ling Han with were even more heated than when they were looking at Xue Yanyu.
Hey.
I don't swing that way, so you don't have to look at me with those eyes. Don't you all just happen to be 6 in total? You make 3 pairs just nicely. I, on the other hand, will not accompany you,
Ling Han said, smiling. Everyone, guard your divine sense. This brat knows how to deliver spiritual attacks, so don't give him any chance. Yes. The 6 nodded as they began a new barrage of strikes at Ling Han. Ling Han did not have an opportunity to launch consecutive attacks with his 7-kill subduing soul technique. With a barrage of blows from 6 great elites of the Mountain River tier, he danced madly like a scarecrow. The only good news was that his physique was really too strong, and so their attacks dealt him completely no damage. Xue Yanyu approached to help, but with her abilities, she could only somewhat impede 2 of them, and there were still 4 left to rain blows down on Ling Han. Finally, Ling Han got the chance to use the 7-kill subduing soul technique, but before he managed to draw that person into the Black Tower, he was sent flying by the other 3, which caused him to miss the chance for an instant kill. The battle was in a stalemate. Overall, Ling Han and Xue Yanyu were at the disadvantage, especially in Xue Yanyu's case. She did not have as tough a physique as Ling Han, and with the combined attacks from 2 equally strong foes, she was in a crisis. Go! Seeing the chance brought by being sent flying, Ling Han landed beside Xue Yanyu, and said in a low voice, I will impede them, and we will reunite at the Crimson Lake. Xue Yanyu hesitated slightly, and then agreed. All right. Ling Han possessed an invincible body. She, on the other hand, would only drag Ling Han down. Thus, she acted decisively here, not being unreasonable and not saying anything more unnecessary. She immediately leaped, and ran towards the side. Don't even think of running. The 2 people who were responsible for tying down Xue Yanyu shouted immediately, but after they suffered 2 subsequent spiritual attacks from Ling Han, their figures abruptly paused. Meanwhile, the other 4 also caught up, which gave Ling Han no further chance to make a move. Ling Han laughed loudly and declared, Come, I will play with you all. Sure, Hao Dongming, the 2 of you go and chase that woman. 2 of the group of 6 split out to chase Xue Yanyu, but Ling Han summoned the annihilating dragon star arrow, and stopped the 2 from going further, firing 2 consecutive shots. In that one instant, Xue Yanyu had run so far that all that was left of her was a small black spot in the distance. All of them were in the low extreme of the Mountain River tier, so they would definitely be incapable of catching up with her now. The 6 of them were all furious, and surrounded Ling Han, all of them filled with burning killing intent. You want to be a hero to save the damsel in distress? How touching. However, how are you going to protect yourself now? Your physique is indeed tough, but we have all the time in the world. We can slowly refine you after we subdue you. You have to know that even the highest grade godly metal could be forged into weapons, so who do you think you are? We will refine you to death, then pluck out your memories and get everything. The 6 spoke out one after another. One of their prey escaping was extremely displeasing to them, but Xue Yanyu was thankfully merely an appetizer, whereas Ling Han was the real treasure trove. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, Then you had better find me first. Great shift of yin and yang. He disappeared. The 6 of them were gaping in shock before going crazy. Where is he? Even if he has escaped into his spatial god tool, where is the spatial god tool? Could it really be that whatever great shift of yin and yang? Chapter 952. Advancing into Mountain River tier. Ling Han entered into the Black Tower, and sat down with crossed legs. Then, he gripped the Mountain River stone in his hand. After entering this place, he, an invincible existence in the Shattering Void tier, could only depend on the 7-kill subduing soul technique and the Black Tower to spring traps on others, and no longer possess the image of invincibility. This made him extremely displeased. Now, he was filled with an incredible thirst for power. He would first advance into the Mountain River tier, then go out and thrash that bunch. Advancing from Shattering Void tier to Mountain River tier was a qualitative change, a true metamorphosis from mortal to immortal. Without talking about anything else, even Shattering Void tier would only have a lifespan of slightly more than 1,000 years, but what about immortals? A cultivator of the low extreme of the Mountain River tier would have a lifespan as long as 100,000 years, and every next advance of a minor level would increase his lifespan by another 100,000 years. And after advancing into the Sun Moon tier, his lifespan would be counted in millions of years. Hence, whether it was the advance of a minor level or a major cultivation tier, it was a massive transformation. Without entering into Immortal level, he would only be an ant in the end. Ordinarily speaking, taking this step would need several months, years, or even more than a century. But with a mountain river stone now in his possession, it was extremely simple. After refining it, he would advance into the mountain river tier. However, there was a limit to this kind of mountain river tier. He would not be able to advance past the low extreme, and still required his personal comprehension of the cultivation level. One hand holding onto the mountain river stone, Ling Han began refining. Wang, an unknown energy surged out of the mountain river stone, and directly took effect inside his dantian, stimulating an amazing change inside his body. His spiritual ocean was drying up, his spiritual pedestal was deteriorating, and the inside of his dantian had very quickly become a mass of ruins. To bring new life amongst destruction. This realization suddenly arose in Ling Han's heart. From mortal to immortal was a qualitative change. Hence, he needed to cast away his old body. The great ocean ebbed completely, leaving behind a wasteland, and in this wasteland, a sliver of life slowly came to be. Hong long long. The ground was trembling, and some kind of change was brewing beneath it. The more essence of the mountain river stone Ling Han drew on, the more obvious this change was. Finally, when he had completely refined this mountain river stone, the ground split apart as if a terrible earthquake was occurring. Then from beneath the ground, a huge a small sharp peak emerged. Hong, Ling Han only felt his whole body shake. This small sharp peak was exuding a powerful energy, which was remolding his body. This was the mountain of mountain river tier. A muscle in Ling Han's cheek twitched slightly. This was a bit too small, wasn't it? However, he had only refined a single mountain river stone. How could he possibly manage to reach the middle stage or the middle stage of the low extreme in an instant? I am already in the mountain river tier now? Ling Han stood up, yet abruptly felt an intense hunger within him. This was not his stomach being hungry, but rather his body, which was filled with hunger for more power. He hurriedly grabbed a large pile of spiritual herbs, and began eating like crazy as he continued to purify even more of the spiritual herbs with the heaven transformation bowl. Then, he poured it into his mouth to fulfill the demands of his body. From mortal to immortal, how humongous this step was. Ling Han could finally understand. After all, if he were to swallow these spiritual herbs a day before, he would burst from being overnourished even if there was only a 10,000th of the amount. But now, he only felt a terrible hunger as if he were about to starve to death. Once about half of the spiritual herbs planted in the Black Tower had been consumed by him, this feeling of hunger finally disappeared. Instead, there was an indescribable feeling of power replacing it. It was really too strong, at least a few hundred times the power of 20 stars of shattering void tier. Xiao, small tower appeared. It was moving lightly and said, "To advance in this manner is not beneficial to your cultivation." I know. Ling Han nodded. However, I am now in a rush to give someone a thrashing, so we can only do this. When I go back, I will cultivate once more from the beginning. Small Tower nodded and continued. However, you still have advanced into the mountain river tier, so the 4th floor of the Black Tower can be opened now. The floor of fire. Ling Han was pleasantly surprised. That's right. You can use divine flame in the Black Tower to temper your spirit and physique to a whole new level, Small Tower said. Can't I use it outside? Ling Han's brow wrinkled in a frown. For the moment, no. Small Tower swayed from left to right. This meant a shake of the head. As long as the tower is not mended, you will only be able to use a portion of the might of the Black Tower, and this is a very small portion. Now, you can go and pass the heavenly tribulation, Small Tower continued. The Black Tower was very amazing as it could even block the tribulation. This was really an absolutely independent space of its own. Ling Han nodded, and flashed out of the Black Tower. Abruptly, he could see the red clouds disperse, and black clouds came rolling out in waves. The brilliant white light of lightning was flickering in the sky. The heavenly tribulation was coming. Ling Han was unafraid. He would make use of the power of the tribulation to temper his godly bones, and improve his physique so it would reach the level of level 2 godly metal. In the vicinity, a young man appeared. At first, he looked surprised, but then he immediately released a large shout to summon his companions. He was a member of the group of 7 from before. They had not managed to find Ling Han,
yet were not satisfied to miss out on this fateful opportunity. Hence, they had left one of their group to stand guard nearby, wanting to know whether Ling Han would suddenly reappear or not. They had really managed to anticipate that moment. The man was slightly surprised. Ling Han actually managed to refine the mountain river stone in the short time of a single day and complete the breakthrough. However, he was just a mountain river tier cultivator that had just broken through, so how much battle prowess could he actually possess? He did not make a move. If he dared to disturb the tribulation of another, he would incur the ire of the heavens and earth, and end up pulled in to experience the tribulation together. This was definitely not good news. Moreover, what need was there for him to be in a rush? After passing the tribulation, Ling Han would definitely be severely injured. This was him speaking from experience. Thus, he was in even less of a rush to make his move. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Very quickly, his 5 companions leaped over in quick succession as well. When they saw Ling Han was about to pass a heavenly tribulation, they could not help but smirk coldly. You hid yourself, so we couldn't find you, but now, you were actually stupid enough to undergo a tribulation here? That really was courting your own death. Hong, a bolt of lightning was already descending from the sky. Ling Han stood proudly. The thing he feared the least was the tribulation. His physique had already crossed over into the mountain river tier in advance, and the might of the tribulation would definitely only be in the early stage of the low extreme. Otherwise, how many people would be able to survive? Guang, guang, guang. Bolts of lightning descended one after another. Ling Han basked in the divine lightning, and took the initiative to let it disintegrate his physique to temper it with the divine lightning. The divine lightning could not harm him, but it was a different case if he were to take the initiative to disintegrate his own physique. His godly bones were broken by force, transforming into uncountable pieces. Experiencing the barrage by the lightning, they were improving and advancing further. In the future, every time he increased his cultivation level, there would be another experience like this. Or so Ling Han thought. This was absolutely a cruel torture. That's right. Every time you advance a minor level, you'll have to experience a tribulation and another tempering of your physique, Small Tower responded. Only with that would your physique be refined and polished to perfection, becoming indestructible and invincible. At the same time, every experience of tempering is also a polishing of your spirit. Couldn't we get some divine pills that could allow one to instantly advance into the Genesis tier? Ling Han said mockingly. Where would be the fun in that? Small Tower countered. There is indeed none, Ling Han replied, smiling. His eyes were bright. He was beginning to structure his godly physique. Chapter 953. Trying out new moves. Ling Han circulated the indestructible heaven scroll, and reformed his godly bones. Destruction followed by construction was a tempering and a qualitative boost. However, this process was really not an enjoyable experience. Ling Han obviously possessed the indestructible true fluid, but he could not use it now, because he needed to allow his godly bones be tempered by the heavenly tribulation to wash away the impurities within. Only with that could his physique advance towards the level of level 2 godly metal. This caused him so much pain that he wanted to die. Temporarily existing without one's body was only possible when one had reached a cultivation level as high as his and had a strong spirit. Otherwise, if it had been an ordinary human being, the body being shattered would have naturally led to definite death. Oh no, this brat failed to pass the tribulation and died. The 6 people on the sidelines all exclaimed, their expressions filled with disappointment. It was naturally impossible that they were sad about Ling Han's death, but if this brat had died, they would not be able to pluck out his soul and obtain the profound secret techniques on Ling Han. But with the raging of the tribulation now, who would dare make a move on Ling Han? Causing a disturbance when another was passing the tribulation, they would be treated the same by the said tribulation. That's not right. If this brat was dead, why has the tribulation not dispersed yet? Someone immediately called out. That's right. If the person was dead, the tribulation would immediately disappear, so why is it still continuing now? This brat is not dead yet. Hee, it's best if he's not dead. Now, this brat has such heavy injuries, with his physique completely disintegrated by the tribulation, so it would be a piece of cake for us to kill him later. They immediately became excited again.
They had an incredible trust in the tribulation because it was a threat that any great elite was incomparably afraid of. Even the ultimate elites of the Genesis tier did not dare clap their chests with confidence, and claim that they were absolutely certain of passing a tribulation safely. Who would not lose half their life every time they passed a tribulation? After 4 hours, Ling Han's godly bones finally completed a qualitative change. He circulated the indestructible heaven scroll to allow his godly bones to heal. Now, these godly bones were on par with level 2 godly metal, and had been boosted up another level in terms of quality. After the reforging of his skeleton, flesh and blood immediately regrew, and he was quickly recovering. He had a bit of spare attention, so he took the initiative to absorb the power of lightning, and began once more to temper his body of lightning. But, this time, he discovered that his ability to absorb the power of lightning was limited. It was not that his physique was inadequate, but rather that the thunderclap ninth heaven seemed not to be as strong as he desired in transforming the power of lightning. It was a mystical power, but in the immortal realm, it was perhaps a very common technique. It already appeared to be less strong than he desired when he had just entered into the immortal level. Ling Han could not help but shake his head. Upon further thought, the 3 styles of black origin originated from the Heaven Sword Palace, and the strongest character in the Heaven Sword Palace was only in the Sun Moon tier, so the might of this sword technique would very soon touch the highest bottleneck it could reach, and it would no longer be possible to improve it further. With a technique that he had not created himself, he would always encounter this kind of awkward situation. In this aspect, he could not help but admire the Rain Emperor, who had invented his own Son of Heaven fist technique. As long as his cultivation level increased, he would naturally boost the might of his self-invented fist technique, and endlessly become stronger. Of course, this process was definitely not simple. Wang, golden characters flipped and turned in Ling Han's mind. Some became words, whilst others took the form of pictures. Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. No, this was not the Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow that he had learnt, but rather a new archery technique. This was the real Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. 1 arrow would annihilate a dragon, and 1 arrow could shatter a galaxy. Only after stepping into the immortal level would he attain the qualification to learn this archery technique. There was only one move because this was not a fixed move, but rather a method to convert power, instilling the full power in one's body into the arrow, which would kill any god or Buddha that deigned to block its path. It did not appear before, because Ling Han had not stepped into immortal level at all. Ling Han revealed a smile. The heavenly tribulation was dispersing. He would soon become a real immortal. Forming the mountains and rivers was only a sign of the mountain river tier. Whether it was successful or otherwise would still have to depend on whether he could pass the tribulation. When the last bolt of lightning fell, the black clouds in the sky also began to quickly disperse, returning to the mass of red they had once been. Shiu, shiu, shiu. The 6 men on the sidelines immediately leaped over, surrounding him closely. You are quite bold, daring to refine our mountain river stone. However, you have suffered heavy injuries passing the tribulation. Though you have forcefully facilitated your recovery by taking spiritual herbs, there must have been extremely serious problems left behind. Quickly surrender, and we can grant you a quick death. The group of 6 sneered coldly, their expressions arrogant. Although they were all in the low extreme of the mountain river tier, 2 of them had reached the peak of the low extreme, while 3 were in the late stage and 1 was in the middle stage. Furthermore, the 2 that had reached the peak were 1-star geniuses, so their battle prowess was comparable to the early stage of the medium extreme. Wouldn't it be very easy for them to deal with a rookie that had just broken through to the mountain river tier? Ling Han cracked a smile and said, I am really expectant. After being a human punching bag for so long, it's finally my turn to fight back. Come, the 6 of you, do you plan on attacking one by one, or will you attack together? Such an arrogant tone. You think you have reached the heavens with a single step just by entering into immortal level? Sure, how, you go deal with him. All right. One young man moved, and very casually pressed down on Ling Han. Wang, the image of a huge mountain and river appeared in midair behind him. There were divine patterns glowing on the mountain as well as on the river. He was in the late stage of the low extreme, so his river was clearly much smaller. The appearance of the mountain river meant that though his attack looked casual, he was actually serious. Otherwise, he could completely conceal his mountain river, just like how it was when he had not made his move. It was obvious that though he possessed a disdainful attitude towards Ling Han, in his heart, he dared not be careless. After all, they were all in the low extreme, so he would naturally not dare be too careless. Ling Han did not have much of an idea of his own power, so he similarly dared not be careless. With a thought, his mountain river took form. Pooh! The remaining 5 instantly choked with laughter. This mountain river was really fucking small. They had looked too highly on him. Though the mountain river would become larger with the increase of cultivation level, with such a low starting point, he definitely did not have much future prospects. Even that Xueqi who had made his move showed a hint of a smile. He had really been too cautious. His opponent had just broken through, so how much might of the mountain river tier would he actually be capable of showing? Pang! The 2 fighters' hands finally came into contact. After a momentary pause, Xueqi's hand actually formed a wave as if it was made of noodles. Pa! A broken bone directly pierced out of his shoulder. The bone shone brightly, covered with bits of blood, yet it was like they were agate, forming beads, but merely gathered and did not fall. All of a sudden, the surroundings were frighteningly silent. Had their sight blurred? The remaining 5 tried their utmost to blink. It should have been Xueqi who had broken Ling Han's bones with a single punch, right? But no matter how hard they blinked their eyes, the scene in front of their eyes did not change in the slightest. They inhaled sharply, and an expression of astonishment appeared on their faces. How much strength would that require? What kind of physique would Ling Han have to be able to break the bone in Xueqi's arm with a single punch? Ah! Xueqi was also dumbstruck. Only now did he feel the agonizing pain, and he could not help but release a terrible scream. He took a few successive steps back, revealing an expression of extreme terror. This force is definitely not something that a cultivator in the low extreme could possess. Early stage of the medium extreme, or perhaps even more than that. Chapter 954. 5-Star Genius. The expressions of the 6 people were all very serious. Power that reached the medium extreme and battle prowess that reached the medium extreme were 2 completely different concepts. Take for example, the 2 individuals in the group of 6 who were at the peak stage of the low extreme Yu Li Hui and Wu Fu. They were both 1-star geniuses, and their battle prowess was already comparable to ordinary cultivators at the early stage of the medium extreme. However, in terms of power alone, they were still at the peak stage of the low extreme. Power was only one part of battle prowess. However, it was also the most important part. If Ling Han's power alone had already reached the early stage of the medium extreme, then what level could his peak battle prowess reach? It was only normal that the group of 6 was scared. That person had only just entered the mountain river tier. 4-star genius? Or perhaps even a 5-star genius. A satisfied smile spread across Ling Han's face. His strength sure did live up to the fact that he had only leveled up after cultivating his strength to 20 stars of Shattering Void tier. Right now, just his power alone had already reached the stage of a 4-star genius. So, what would it reach if he took his Eye of Truth, 3 styles of Black Origin, and other mystical powers into consideration as well? Kume, Kume, Kume. Let's fight to our heart's content. He appeared extremely enthusiastic, and he couldn't wait to test out his strength. You think we're scared of you? The group of 6 roared. Even the wounded Xueqi hurriedly swallowed a few pills to forcefully set his broken bones back into place. Then, he used his origin power to hold it in place. With such treatment, he would be able to fight at full strength for a short period of time. However, these 6 people were certainly not brave or honorable individuals, and they all drew out their weapons. Some wielded swords, and some wielded sabers. Their formation appeared very neat. Ling Han laughed loudly as he took the initiative to launch an attack. His physique was on par with level 2 godly metal, so whom in this mystery realm would he need to fear? Bang! 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 Ling Han was like a lion tearing into a pack of wolves, and the 6 people were too afraid to even face him head-on. They all skirted to Ling Han's side before launching attacks toward him. As the swords and sabers flashed about, one of them suddenly started to pulsate with a divine pattern. It wasn't as simple as the weapon being forged from godly metal. It had been imprinted with a divine pattern, meaning that it possessed an additional power. It was a god tool. This was the first time Ling Han had seen a god tool in the immortal realm.
He couldn't help but find it fresh and interesting. The additional power that this god tool possessed was flames. A wave of flames would occasionally sweep out from the tip of the sword blade. They were extremely thin, yet they were incredibly powerful. After purposefully allowing a wave of flames to hit him, smoke wafted from Ling Han's hand. He also felt a hint of scorching heat. However, it was merely a little hot. Perhaps these flames wouldn't even be able to wound his previous physique, which was only on par with level 1 godly metal. That being so, how could it wound the current him? But what if the level of this god tool was slightly higher? Ling Han nodded imperceptibly. Even though he possessed a powerful physique, he still couldn't be too careless. After all, his current cultivation level was still too low. He retrieved his Heaven Transformation Bowl to test whether he could snatch this god tool. Wang! Streaks of divine patterns lit up on the Heaven Transformation Bowl as it rose into the sky and faced off against that god tool. They were an even match. Ling Han involuntarily sighed. By the looks of it, the grade of the Heaven Transformation Bowl was only a so. As it couldn't snatch that god tool, it was evident that its grade was merely that of a level 1 god tool. In fact, this made a lot of sense. If its grade had been too high, how could he have activated it? In the small world, Ling Han's wealth was quite enormous. The Heaven Transformation Bowl, the Vial of Curses. Which of these wouldn't incite envy and jealousy if they were shown to others? However, looking at them now, they were merely level 1 god tools, the lowest grade tools in the Immortal realm. Ling Han unleashed his 3 styles of Black Origin, Thunderclap 9th Heaven, and other secret techniques as he analyzed his own battle prowess. If he didn't use any martial arts techniques and relied on his power alone, then his battle prowess could reach a 4-star level. When he activated any one of his secret techniques, however, his battle prowess still remained at a 4-star level. His battle prowess couldn't rise to the 5th-star level. Only when he activated several of his mystical powers together could his battle prowess finally surge up to a 5th-star level. From this, it could be seen just how difficult it was to punch above one's weight in the Immortal level. At the same time, Ling Han rejoiced that he had persisted in raising his power to the level of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier. Otherwise, his battle prowess right now would only be able to reach a maximum of 4 stars. However, I still haven't tested the ultimate arrow of the Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow yet, Ling Han thought to himself. He wasn't planning on testing it, either. This arrow would drain all the power in his body, and it would most likely take him a very long time to recover after launching such a strike. Moreover, the strength of these 6 people was far too weak. As such, he wouldn't be able to determine the limit of the Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow anyway. Then let me test the Vial of Curses again. Ling Han wounded each of the 6 people and collected their blood into the Vial of Curses. In the end, 1 person was killed, and 2 had their hands and feet rot away. The remaining 3 were merely rendered dizzy. Sure enough, the Vial of Curses was also a low-grade god tool. Enough with this waste of time. Ling Han raised his battle prowess, and quickly disposed of the 2 people whose hands and feet had been rotted away by his Vial of Curses. Then, he swung his sword and slashed a 3rd person to death. With that done, there were only 2 opponents remaining, both at the peak stage of the low extreme. The 2 people exchanged a glance, and each could see a look of sheer terror on the other's face. They immediately turned around to flee, both speeding off in a different direction. Ha! Ling Han cast a 7-kill subduing soul technique, and the expression of the person on the left instantly froze. Once Ling Han caught up, he slammed his earth-overturning seal into his opponent's head, instantly extinguishing his mind. However, in that instant, the person on the right had already fled over 300 meters. Ling Han drew a bow and activated his Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. Whoosh! An arrow shot out. He didn't use the ultimate arrow. However, this arrow was still tremendously terrifying, and the fleeing person simply didn't have the courage to turn back and resist. How could he evade such attacks if all he knew to do was run? Puh! The arrow penetrated his body and pierced through his heart. That person dazedly turned around, and it looked as if he wanted to say something. Pang! However, his entire chest exploded violently. It was a swift death. Impressive! Ling Han walked over to retrieve his arrow. He had obtained this arrow from the assassin of the Dark Night Hall. In the beginning, he hadn't realized that the shaft of the arrow was imbued with divine patterns, which raised the lethality of the arrow immensely. Fortunately, his physique was suitably strong. Otherwise, if he had been run through by this arrow at that time, he wouldn't have the chance to be standing here right now. This is an important lesson, Ling Han mumbled to himself. I can't become careless just because I think my physique is powerful. Otherwise, I'll only be digging my own grave. After cleaning the spatial spirit tools of the 6 people, he discovered a few hundred true origin stones. This was a small mound of wealth. What delighted him further was that there were also 3 pieces of spiritual meat as well as 2 mountain river stones. No wonder so many people like to kill and loot. Indeed, it's a great way to rapidly accumulate wealth. However, just as you're able to kill others, others are also able to kill you. This is an endless cycle of grief and destruction. I won't seek to actively kill and loot others. However, if anyone is blind enough to target me, heh. Also, that divine sword suited Ling Han quite nicely. However, he didn't dare use it here, or he would be announcing to the world that it was he who had killed the group of 7. Although it was common knowledge that battle and slaughter was inevitable in this mystery realm, it was still a bad idea to be too showy. I'll test it out when I get back. Ling Han carefully determined his direction. There was no sun or moon here, and north, south, east, and west were all relative. These directions had been artificially decided after countless years of exploration. He had already memorized Xue Yenyu's map a while back. Thus, after analyzing the terrain for a while, he started walking in the direction of the Crimson Lake. Woo-woo! After a short while, the sound of eerie sobbing traveled over from the dense woods to his side. It sounded like the sobbing of a ghost. Chapter 955. What ghost? Ling Han's heart suddenly jolted. All kinds of weird and bizarre monstrosities could appear in the mystery realm. Perhaps, it was nothing unusual for a ghost to appear. However, curiosity killed the cat. He was brave and extremely curious, and thus he couldn't help but creep toward that stretch of woods. He trod nimbly, and even drew his divine sword. His movements were especially careful. After arriving at the edge of the woods, he lightly swept aside the tall grass. A sobbing white-robed person appeared in his view. The terrifying thing was, she actually didn't have a head. It's really a ghost? Ling Han clenched the sword in his hand as a numb feeling spread across his body. This wasn't a feeling of fear. Rather, it was one of excitement. He had never killed a ghost before. Shill! He leaped forward, and his sword flashed down. Ha! The white-robed figure suddenly raised her head. Who said she didn't have a head? It was just that her head was buried too far down just then. Moreover, her arms had also been wrapped behind her neck, so he had only been able to see the white-colored cloth of her robes. As a result, Ling Han had mistaken her for being headless. Hu Feiyun, the 9th king. The face of this young female was covered in tears, and her expression was also one of daze. Only when the reflection of the sword flashed in her eyes did her dainty mouth suddenly become slack. A stunned expression spread across her face, yet she didn't even attempt to instinctively block or evade. It was already too late for Ling Han to stop his strike, so he instead decided to push forward and send the tip of his sword scraping past the left side of Hu Feiyun's face. A light breeze blew over, causing Hu Feiyun's robes to dance in the air. Pu. After the sword ray slashed past, at least 100 towering trees behind Hu Feiyun came crashing down as they were cut down in unison. Hu Feiyun was momentarily dazed before she suddenly came to her senses, and leaped to her feet. She wiped her tears, sobbing. Why are you attacking me? There was an aggrieved expression on her pretty face. This? Ling Han smiled bitterly and said, I thought you were a ghost. I'm not a ghost, Hu Feiyun exclaimed as she frantically shook her head. However, her expression suddenly became fearful, and she asked, There are ghosts here? She was so frightened that she had already started to tremble. Ling Han was unable to fathom how a young girl like her could become the 9th king and command respect from both the left and right ministers as well as the 7 generals. He chuckled and replied, Probably not. It means there's a chance? Hu Feiyun apparently liked to stubbornly delve into such ambiguities. Even if there are ghosts, there's nothing to be afraid of. Ling Han smiled and said, As the saying goes, a clear conscience should not be afraid when a ghost comes knocking. Ah! Stop talking about it. Hu Feiyun's pretty face instantly turned pale with fear. I've poured laxative into the spiritual liquid that I've served my sisters before. I'm going to be plagued by ghosts. Whoa. Ling Han was rendered speechless for a short while. In the end, he could only try to console her and said, "It's fine. Such kind of action isn't severe enough to attract the attention of ghosts. Do you think that ghosts are also idle? How do you know if ghosts are idle or not? Have you seen ghosts before?" There was a hint of curiosity on Hu Feiyun's face as she continued to tremble in fear. Ling Han was almost driven crazy by her. He hurriedly changed the topic and asked, "Ninth King, why were you crying here by yourself? Where are your 3 guards?" Hu Feiyun immediately started crying again upon hearing his question. "Ting Qin and Yun Rong. They're both dead." She sobbed. "Whoa. They were only eaten by an evil beast because they were trying to protect me." Ling Han was startled by her words. Based on the Empress of the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire's fondness of the Ninth King, the 3 female guards that she'd assigned to her were definitely not ordinary. In addition to cultivation levels of peak stage low extreme, they had definitely also raised their battle prowess to the level of 3 or even 4-star geniuses through secret techniques. However, the 3 of them were still no match for their opponent. Just how powerful was that evil beast? Its battle prowess was at least at the high extreme. Perhaps it had even reached the late stage or peak stage of the high extreme. Otherwise, there was no way it could kill all 3 guards and leave no survivors. If Ling Han came across such an existence, his only option would be to flee as well. There was still a chance that a level 2 godly metal could be damaged by someone with a battle prowess of the high extreme. Moreover, his spirit hadn't improved significantly, so the 7-kill subduing soul technique would most likely have little to no effect as well. Protecting you was their duty. Now that you're safe, they're also able to rest in peace. Ling Han consoled her. "Whoa, but I'm still really sad." Hu Feiyun sobbed as she wiped away her tears. Okay. You'll ruin your beauty if you keep crying." Ling Han wasn't good at comforting others. In addition, when compared to Hu Niu, it seemed like Hu Feiyun was the child, and Hu Niu was the adult. However, it seemed like this remark was fairly effective on Hu Feiyun. She hurriedly wiped away her tears and straightened her face to keep herself from crying. She took out a mirror and looked at her own reflection. Then, an aggrieved expression appeared on her face, and it seemed like she was about to cry again. "I really have become uglier." No, you haven't. You're extremely beautiful." Ling Han hastily took out some food and handed it over. "Here, have some food." If she was Hu Niu, she would definitely grin widely and forget whatever had happened. However, the 9th King wasn't a glutton, and her expression didn't relax a single bit. "Then just sit here and wait," Ling Han said. "When the time comes, you'll naturally be able to leave." "No." Hu Feiyun immediately jumped up and grabbed onto his sleeve. "I'm scared. I don't want to be alone." She looked extremely pitiful, like a little girl who was trying to get things to go her way. Ling Han found it hard to fathom that such a person could become a super elite who'd command seas and waves in the future. However, the previous 8 kings had all broken through to the heavenly body tier. Following this pattern, it was only natural that she broke through to the heavenly body tier as well. "Fine, then how about you follow me?" Ling Han said with a nod. He couldn't stand Hu Feiyun's eyes, which seemed like they could speak. Fortunately, this woman was more of a childish and naive type. If she was a flirtatious and enchanting type, she would definitely be able to bewitch someone to death. Thankfully, he could pass her off to Xue Yanyu when he arrived at Crimson Lake. Hu Feiyun breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing Ling Han's words. However, she wouldn't let go of his sleeve no matter what. It seemed like she was scared that he would suddenly run away. Ling Han sighed, and brought the little bum beetle along with him. Luckily, they were quite close to Crimson Lake already, and the journey would only take 1 day or so. Chihu! After walking for a short while, a rugged mountain road appeared before them. At the same time, the harrowing call of a beast reverberated from the mountain peak. It seemed as if the beast was announcing its territory. "It's that evil beast." Hu Feiyun instantly shrunk toward Ling Han in fright. "Don't go over, you'll be eaten." "Can't you say something more positive?" Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "Our aim is merely to pass through this place, so we don't need to clash with that demonic beast.
We can try to make it through stealthily. Hu Feiyun frantically nodded in agreement. She was indeed very lacking in courage. The mountains here rose and fell, and acted as quite the perfect natural shelter. The duo hid behind the many rocks as they passed through this mountain, and when they left, Ling Han saw a peculiar beast lying on the mountain peak. It had the figure of a wolf, yet there was a pair of gigantic black wings on its back. It also had 3 heads, 1 gold, 1 silver, and 1 red. Its appearance was incredibly bizarre. Even though they were already so far away, Ling Han's glance still triggered a reaction from the demonic beast. One of the wolf heads instantly looked over with an expression of disdain. It didn't move any further, yet another beast wolf by its side took flight. Its appearance was similar to the demonic beast, yet its size was much smaller. Moreover, it only had 2 heads, 1 silver, and 1 red. The silver head was also much smaller, reaching only half of the size of the red head. The 2-headed flying wolf soared toward Ling Han and Hu Feiyun. Behind it, there was a shadow of 2 mountains and a river. Chapter 956. Battling the Demon Wolf. 2 mountains and a river. This represented the middle stage of the medium extreme of the mountain-river tier. 2 wolf heads meant medium extreme, so did 3 wolf heads mean high extreme. Even Ling Han stood no chance against such existence. In fact, there was even a possibility that his godly physique could be torn to shreds. No wonder the 3 guards assigned to Hu Feiyun by the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire were all killed. That demonic beast was indeed far too powerful. However, middle stage of the medium extreme. Ling Han didn't flee. Instead, he was brimming with a boundless fighting spirit. That beast had wings, and it was also at the medium extreme. How could they escape if no one obstructed its advance? Ling Han still had a trump card in form of the Black Tower. Thus, he wasn't flustered by the demonic beasts. Rather, he took out a bow and arrow. Facing off against such a powerful demonic beast, it was just the right time for him to test the might of the annihilating Dragon Star Arrow's ultimate arrow. What should we do? What should we do? Hu Feiyun was already running around in panic. Surprisingly, however, she was loyal enough not to ditch Ling Han and flee by herself. Of course, there was also the possibility that she had been scared silly, so much so that she had forgotten to flee. Ling Han activated his Eye of Truth and locked onto one of the demon wolf's heads. Then, he drew his bow, and the profound meaning of the ultimate arrow circulated in his mind. He gathered all of his focus onto the body of the arrow. Wang! Amazingly, the divine pattern on the arrow lit up even without the addition of blood. This divine pattern was extremely unique, and it could only be activated and release a devastating might when it came into contact with blood. Even origin power couldn't suppress this arrow, and it had the ability to obliterate even godly physiques. However, now that Ling Han was channeling his full power into the arrow, it actually lit up in advance. Ling Han's mind became devoid of other thoughts, and his eyes also stopped seeing other objects. His attention was solely focused on the demon wolf that was racing over. Xiao! He released the arrow. A feeling of exhaustion instantly swept over his body. His body was like jelly, and sweat trickled down his body like a small stream. If it hadn't been for his sturdy physique, it was very likely that he would have already plunked on the ground by now. The ultimate arrow, which was imbued with all of his essence, energy, and spirit, was fired out. How powerful was this arrow? Shua! The arrow tore through the air as quickly as a meteor. The demon wolf was astonished, and it beat its wings in a desperate attempt to evade. However, it was already too late. With a plop, the arrow penetrated the left eye of its red head, and sunk all the way to its wing. Pa! Its red head was instantly obliterated. Crimson flames blanketed the sky as raging flames burst from its violently severed neck. In fact, these flames even burst onto the silver head of the demon wolf, causing it to shriek loudly in agony and frantically beat its wings. It didn't die. Is this because it still has another head? When fighting against such demonic beasts, must one decapitate all heads to kill them? The vitality of this demon wolf was far too immense, and it furiously glared at Ling Han with its last remaining head. Its eyes were glowing with hatred. Ling Han loaded his bow again. The demon wolf let out an angry howl as it abruptly turned around and fled back toward the mountain peak. Ling Han immediately plunked to the floor. How could he still fire another arrow? He had merely been faking it just then. Unexpectedly, the demon wolf actually fell for his bluff due to its relatively high intelligence. If it were one of the fearless demonic beasts that he had killed before, it would charge regardless of whether it was stronger or weaker. Ling Han felt completely drained. Both his stamina and origin power had hit rock bottom. The might of the ultimate arrow was indeed overwhelming. However, it came at the price of instantly draining his power. After injecting all of his power into the arrow to imbue it with the might of a godly arrow, Ling Han, who could ordinarily exert a power on par with the early stage of the medium extreme, was finally able to achieve a destructive power on par with the late stage of the medium extreme. Otherwise, the arrow would have never been that powerful. I've surpassed 6 stars. Ling Han was extremely pleased. 5-star geniuses only existed in legends. However, he had already reached the level of a 6-star genius. Although part of the reason was the godly arrow itself, one had to remember that he had only just reached the low extreme. If he stabilized his cultivation level a little, he would be able to generate a 6-star destructive power even when using ordinary godly metal arrows. Howl! Upon seeing the small beast become injured, the large demonic beast flared up in rage. Its 3 heads roared toward the sky, and even at such a long distance, Ling Han and Hu Feiyun could still feel a wave of terrifying pressure. Whoosh! It flapped its wings as it soared into the sky and streaked after Ling Han and Hu Feiyun. Its flapping wings were like bolts of lightning. It would be futile even if Ling Han were at full strength and could fire another annihilating dragon star arrow, to say nothing of his current state of feebleness. There was a whole 2 minor levels of difference, and the joint peace planet definitely didn't have anyone who could surpass such a large difference. Ling Han only had a fraction of a second to make a decision. Don't resist my divine sense, Ling Han shouted to Hu Feiyun. He had a fairly favorable impression of the 9th king. She was innocent and kind, and he was also indebted to her as she had once gifted him the Jade Sun Pill. He couldn't bring himself to watch her die in the mouth of the demon wolf. To his surprise, Hu Feiyun still had the time to roll her eyes at him at this moment. Why are you so aggressive? She asked pitifully. Where did Ling Han have time to explain? He hastily unleashed his divine sense and wrapped it around Hu Feiyun. Pang! His divine sense bounced back toward him. This was a sign of resistance. There was only one last method if he still wanted to wrap her in his divine sense. That was, he had to knock her out with his 7-kill subduing soul technique, and then pull her into his black tower. That's not a bad option either. At least she'll be kept in the dark. Otherwise, with her innocent personality, she'll definitely spill the beans if someone were to probe a little. Ling Han immediately unleashed a spiritual attack. Unexpectedly, however, a pink barrier materialized around Hu Feiyun's body, and forcefully reflected his divine sense away. At the same time, a terrifying aura radiated from her body, and made Ling Han feel as if he were a tiny and insignificant ant. This aura! It's quite familiar. It's the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. The Empress definitely cast some secret technique on her to protect her divine sense. However, isn't it having the opposite effect right now? Boom! The speed of the large demonic beast was incredible, and it caught up to them in the blink of an eye. Its mouths expanded and then opened as its 3 heads glared at Ling Han and Hu Feiyun. Dozens of golden light swords shot out from its golden head. Meanwhile, threads of white silk sprayed out from its silver head and formed a large net. The silk threads were thin and dense, and they radiated a cold and ghastly glow. If one came into contact with them, they would most likely be sliced into several pieces. The red head spat out columns of flames. These flames were incredibly hot, and even level 1 godly metal would probably melt under the intense heat. Ling Han didn't have any other option now that things had come to this. He could only hide into the Black Tower by himself. Otherwise, he would die alongside Hu Feiyun. Such a death would be completely meaningless. However, just as he was about to enter the Black Tower, he heard a hum from Hu Feiyun. Her voice was surprisingly frosty, and it was brimming with the overwhelming might of a ruler. Pang! The blanket of attacks in the sky instantly vanished. At the same time, the demon wolf heavily plunged to the ground. It was completely unmoving as if it had been scared to death.
Ling Han was stunned as he turned to look at Hu Feiyun. The frosty humph just then definitely didn't belong to Hu Feiyun. Rather, it belonged to the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. There was definitely no mistake about it. That Empress was far too dazzling, and it was impossible to forget her demeanor and voice even if one had only seen or heard her once before. However, Ling Han was stumped as to how the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire had borrowed Hu Feiyun's body to launch an attack and suppress a demon wolf at the high extreme of the mountain river tier with a mere humph. Chapter 957. Crimson Lake. The Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire was at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. Thus, suppressing a demonic beast that was merely at the high extreme of the mountain river tier was an extremely simple task for her. The problem was, how far away from here was the Empress right now? Did she leave a wisp of divine sense on Hu Feiyun's body? Or did she cast some other secret technique on her? Ling Han shook his head in his mind. To the best of his knowledge, the Immortal realm didn't have any such secret technique. Otherwise, why did the left minister need to search for Tang Feng? If he attached a wisp of his divine sense onto his beloved daughter and left a secret technique on her, then wouldn't venturing this place be like walking over flat ground? However, Ling Han was certain that it was the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire who had just made a move. The Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire indeed lived up to her position as one of the three rulers of the joint peace planet. She possessed abilities that ordinary people did not. At this moment, Hu Feiyun turned around to glance at him. It was clearly the same face, yet her aura was completely different. She was emanating the might of a ruler, and this caused Ling Han's breathing to falter slightly. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. This definitely wasn't Hu Feiyun. Instead, she was the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. More precisely, the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire had taken control of Hu Feiyun's body. An icy glint flashed past Hu Feiyun's eyes. Her killing intent instantly became material, and shredded the surrounding space apart. However, after a brief moment of hesitation, she eventually didn't take any further action. The petrifying aura vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Ha! When did this evil beast die? Hu Feiyun suddenly exclaimed. Her voice was filled with surprise and confusion. Ling Han looked up, only to see that Hu Feiyun had already returned to her innocent and naive self. It was as though she had absolutely no recollection of what had just occurred. Strange. Ling Han suddenly felt that the Ninth King didn't merely have a sisterly relationship with the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Instead, it was likely that their relationship ran much deeper. It was even more likely that there was some big secret hidden behind their relationship. Thus, the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire had thought about killing him to shut him up just then. In the end, however, she didn't. Of course, even if she did attack, Ling Han could always hide into the Black Tower. Ling Han, did you kill this evil beast? Hu Feiyun's large eyes were sparkling with gratitude as she looked at him. This is great. You've avenged Ting Qin and Yun Rong's deaths. She was extremely moved, and she continuously shook one of Ling Han's arms as she spoke. The pitiful Ling Han still hadn't recovered from his feebleness yet, so Hu Feiyun's strong shaking caused a wave of dizziness to overcome him. Calm down, calm down. There's still another demonic beast. Ling Han said hastily. Hu Feiyun was instantly given a small fright. Her actions were jittery as she hurriedly turned around to look at the mountain peak. However, that small demon wolf had seen Hu Feiyun's prowess, and it was also missing one of its heads right now. Its power had already fallen to the middle stage of the low extreme. When it saw Hu Feiyun look over, it thought that she was planning to finish it off. It frantically beat its wings and fled into the distance. Hu Feiyun breathed a long sigh of relief. Thank heavens you disposed of the large evil beast. Now, even this small evil beast is afraid of you. It's afraid of you, okay? Ling Han said in his mind. However, he didn't argue with her and said, I need to recover my strength. We'll set off after that. Hu Feiyun eagerly nodded her head. Ling Han swallowed an alchemical pill. However, he didn't have any cultivation techniques of the mountain river tier right now, so he was unable to extract spiritual qi to actively speed up the process of his recovery. He could only passively wait for his origin power to be replenished. As it turned out, The recovery of his physical strength was a much easier process. All he needed to do was rest for a short while. I blundered. I didn't prepare a cultivation technique of the mountain river tier in advance. Ling Han retrieved a true origin stone, and almost instinctively absorbed the spiritual qi that was contained within it. Although this process was quite slow, it was still better than doing nothing at all. After a full 6 hours, he was finally able to replenish all of his origin power. Hu Feiyun naturally wouldn't collect spiritual meat by herself. How could she partake in such a bloody activity? Moreover, mountain river stones were rare, but spiritual meat was definitely no special item in her eyes. Ling Han didn't hesitate, and cut the spiritual meat off the 3-headed flying wolf. It was as large as a finger, and gave off a fragrant and alluring smell. Let's go! The two of them continued their journey toward Crimson Lake. After several hours, a crimson-colored lake finally appeared before their eyes. There wasn't a single ripple on the surface of the lake, and it appeared much like a congealed pool of blood. At the same time, it also appeared like a blood-colored crystal. Is this Crimson Lake? Better off calling it Blood Lake or Red Crystal Lake, Ling Han said mockingly. He and Hu Feiyun were not the first ones to arrive here. There were numerous people sitting cross-legged near the bank of the lake, and there were even some people who were venturing toward the center of the lake. There were 4 sets of floating stones each running along a different direction in the lake. Each set formed a snaky path that led toward the center of the lake. At the center of the lake, there was a very small island. The face-up side of the stones was all cut very neatly, and each stone was placed roughly 3 meters apart from the next. Those venturing toward the central island all stood on one stone before attempting to leap toward the next. To cultivators, a distance of 3 meters was nothing. However, this didn't appear to be the case here, and the cultivators all huffed with exertion after jumping from one stone to the next. Sweat trickled down their faces. Plop! Someone fell into the lake, and immediately started wailing in agony. He swam toward the bank as if his life depended on it, and it could be seen that his body had already become a bloody mess. It seemed as though the lake water had an extremely potent corrosive quality. That person consumed medicines and channeled cultivation techniques, yet the flesh on his arms and legs still fell off piece after piece. His white bones gradually became visible, yet even these started to show signs of corrosion. The corrosive ability of the lake water eventually stopped at the bones. However, that person had already become completely unrecognizable. There were bloody holes on his face, chest, and abdomen, and his brain, heart, intestines, and other internal organs had all become clearly visible. It was an extremely horrifying sight. Ling Han. Xue Yanyu briskly walked over upon noticing his arrival. There was a relieved expression on her face. You finally arrived. Ling Han nodded and asked, What's going on here? There's a small island in the center of the Crimson Lake, and there is a total of 4 paths that lead toward it, Xue Yanyu explained. The paths are those floating stones that you can see. However, there are astonishing gravity fields on those stones, and the further one ventures, the stronger the gravity field becomes. Only now did Xue Yanyu see Hu Feiyun. She hurriedly bowed and said, My respects to the 9th king. She was slightly astonished by her own actions. Upon seeing that Ling Han was safe, she was actually so moved that she even ignored the presence of the 9th king. Hu Feiyun waved her hand and said, No need for the formalities. Her actions appeared especially casual. Meanwhile, Ling Han asked, Are there mountain river stones on that island? Indeed. Xue Yanyu nodded, and said, Although mountain river stones might exist in any location of the Mystery Realm, it's certain that they exist on the island in the Crimson Lake. Moreover, the mountain river stones that exist here are ones with special attributes. Oh, so what's the special attribute of the mountain river stones here? Ling Han's eyes lit up in delight. Extreme weight, Xue Yanyu replied. Ling Han nodded and said, Then I'll definitely have to obtain a few. Xue Yanyu couldn't help but shake her head. Even if you succeed, you can only obtain 1 mountain river stone at a time. Not to mention, it's extremely difficult to reach the island in the center. In addition, the gravity fields that you experience will become much more powerful on your second attempt to reach the island. In fact, they become more and more powerful with each ensuing attempt. Only an extremely small number of people is able to succeed once, not to mention succeeding more than once. However, if fortune favors you, Ordinary mountain river stones might appear on the floating stones as well. They do appear occasionally. Ling Han grinned widely. I'm no ordinary person. Xue Yanyu immediately rolled her eyes in a charming manner. She had never seen someone as shameless as Ling Han. However, Hu Feiyun nodded in agreement. She believed that the three-headed flying wolf had been killed by Ling Han. Thus, she naturally viewed him as a celestial, and held a blind trust in his power. Chapter 958. Zhao Luan's Achievement. You have to be careful. Although Xue Yanyu wasn't a fan of Ling Han's smugness, she still warned him. You also saw just then. The lake water is overflowing with corrosive power. If you're pushed off the stones by their gravity fields, you'll be severely wounded even if you aren't killed. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He had seen the might of the lake water, and even he didn't dare pat his chest and guarantee that his level 2 precious metal physique would be able to resist its corrosive property. After all, he hadn't personally experienced it yet. If someone has wings, can't they directly fly over? He asked curiously. Demonic beasts could shapeshift into human form when they reached the immortal level. They could even mate with humans and have half-human, half-demonic offspring, which would also have special abilities. For example, they could have fish gills and be able to breathe underwater, or have wings and be able to soar in the skies. In the immortal realm, such beings were called half-humans. It would be great if it were so easy. Xue Yanyu shook her head and said, the higher one is, the more potent the force of the gravity field. Otherwise, you could simply expand into a gigantic form and stride onto the island in a single step. True. Ling Han smiled and nodded. To elites of the immortal level, expanding or shrinking their body 100-fold for a short period of time was no difficult feat if one could stride onto the island in a single step. Then this lake and island would have lost their meaning. If that's the case, then it's obvious that someone has purposefully laid this out as it is, he speculated. Did a great elite of the Genesis tier really lay things out here in the past? Perhaps, Xue Yanyu said, nodding. That was already a matter from hundreds of millions of years ago. Who could survive for so long and live into the current age? Anyway, 100 million years was merely how far back history could delve. Perhaps this mystery realm had existed since a long time before that. Forget about it, Ling Han said. Regardless of who created this place, I'll give the stone path a shot first. Be careful, Xue Yanyu warned again. Meanwhile, Hu Feiyun was brimming with confidence. Ling Han will definitely succeed. Ling Han laughed loudly, and acted as if he were going to pinch Xue Yanyu's pretty face. Your tone is becoming more and more like you were my wife. Xue Yanyu cussed as she hurriedly dodged Ling Han's hand. What can you expect from a hog but a grunt? Ling Han strode toward one of the lake's bridges. It's that brat. His appearance instantly attracted the attention of a few people. Two youths instantly walked over with their arms wrapped around their chests. They stared at Ling Han coldly. Ling Han swept his gaze over them, and also recognized who they were. Before entering the mystery realm, Xue Yanyu had already told him about these individuals. One of them was called Yi Wen Shan, and another was called Tang Hua. They were both students of the Northern Institution, but they weren't members of the Shattering Void Tier Division. Rather, they were students of the Low Extreme Division. Their ranks were very high as well, with one ranked at 480, and the other ranked at 522. In addition, they also had another identity. That was, they were the subordinates of Bai Yuanxi, one of the three great followers of Zhao Luan. In simpler terms, they were the lackeys of Zhao Luan's lackeys. Junior brother Ling, this is not an easy path to cross, Tang Hua said. Each floating stone is slippery and inhospitable to the feet. In addition to that, there are also the extremely powerful gravity fields. You've got to be careful not to fall into the lake. That's something that could easily melt you to death. If I were you, I'd rid myself of any thoughts of advancing, Yi Wen Shan added. Ling Han flashed a smile and said, No need to provoke me. Since I've already walked over, I have no intention of giving up halfway. On the other hand, if senior brothers want to target me while I'm crossing, and for example push me off the floating stones or something, let me warn senior brothers in advance. Be careful of becoming victims of your own evil deeds. You?
anger flashed across Yi Wenshan and Tang Hua's faces. This ant from the small world actually dared to threaten them back. You think you're on top of the world just because you broke through to the mountain river tier? Tang Hua sneered. In a short while, you'll realize just how laughable your belief is. The two of them stopped talking, and merely continued to glare at Ling Han. They would follow him whenever he started to advance forward. Then they would push him into the lake. As such, they would also have an excuse afterward. The gravity fields on the floating stones were immense. Thus, it was very understandable if they lost their footing. Ling Han naturally knew what they were thinking. He chuckled coldly in his mind as he confidently strode forward. Wang! His body suddenly felt a lot heavier when he stepped onto the first stone. His hair and clothes all sagged downward. These were things that usually didn't experience much gravity. Now, however, there were extremely evident changes. This was enough to show the power of these gravity fields. Ling Han unleashed a tiny bit of his origin power, and his speed barely faltered as he strode onto the next stone. As he did so, the gravity field became a few degrees stronger. Clacking sounds could be heard as his bones collided with each other. In total, there were 100 stepping stones. If the second stone was already this powerful, then how terrifying was the stone at the end? Plop! Ahead of him, another person fell into the water. They frantically swam toward the bank, and naturally, their state was a horror to look at. Motherfucker! The gravity fields here are so bloody freakish. Can people truly reach the island? Someone shouted. Of course they can. Just cast your mind to 10 years ago. The Western institution's Pang Yu succeeded in reaching the island. If we go further back, senior brother Zhao Luan also succeeded a few hundred years ago. Not only did he succeed, but he was also able to obtain 2 mountain river stones in a row. What? 2? Don't the gravity fields become numerous times more powerful after one has succeeded once? Indeed. That's why the strength of senior brother Zhao Luan is unfathomable. Gasp! Senior brother Zhao Luan was already freakishly powerful to begin with. Now that he's refined 2 extreme weight mountain river stones, just how terrifying has his battle prowess become? Many people were rendered speechless at the mention of Zhao Luan's great name. This was a godlike male whom they could only look up to. His lofty standing was not something they could dream of reaching. Do you guys know that senior brother Zhao's 3 great followers by UNC, Zhuo and Fan Yong have also obtained a mountain river stone from here before? What? Numerous people had never heard of this secret information before, and their minds all became numb with shock. Even his followers are that freakishly powerful? Otherwise, what right do they have to become followers of senior brother Zhao? In the end, an elder concluded, it's not impossibly difficult to obtain a single mountain river stone from this place. Every time, there are a dozen or so people who are able to complete this feat. However, in the past 500 years, only one person has managed to obtain 2 mountain river stones. Fuck! Many people clasped their heads in shock. No wonder Zhao Luan had the title #1 prodigy in 1,000 years. His strength was indeed a long way ahead of other prodigies. Ling Han's mind was calm, yet a feeling of pride welled up in his heart. Zhao Luan could obtain 2 mountain river stones here? Then he would obtain 3. He raised his foot, and steadily took his 3rd step. Yi Wenshan and Tang Hua weren't in a hurry to make their move. They were both waiting for Ling Han to walk further first. That way, Ling Han would receive more severe wounds after he fell into the lake. In fact, there was a possibility that he wouldn't make it back to the bank, and even his bones would be dissolved into nothing. Before long, however, the expressions on their faces changed. Why is he running so fast? He's already crossed over 30 stone steps. They exchanged a glance, and didn't hesitate any longer. They raised their speed and hurriedly chased after Ling Han. It was evident that their aim was to knock him into the lake. Chapter 959. Hoisted by One's Own Petard. Since Yi Wenshan and Tang Hua were excellent students ranked 480 and 522 in the Northern Institution's Low Extreme Division, they were naturally at the peak stage of the Low Extreme. Moreover, they were both 1-star geniuses, and their true battle prowess was on par with the early stage of the Medium Extreme. They had already tried their hand at it before, and advancing 80 steps was the limit of their abilities. Thus, even though they did face some pressure before this limit, they still had the energy to perform some other actions. For example, pushing someone into the lake. Xiao! Xiao! They speedily leaped forward. The floating stones weren't overly small, and they were large enough to fit one person comfortably. However, it would become a little crowded if 2 people stood on the same stone, and 3 people definitely wouldn't be able to do so. Like a sweeping breeze, Yi Wenshan and Tang Hua drew closer and closer to Ling Han. A cold smile crept across their faces. "You're about to run out of luck." "Out of our way!" they roared in unison. They leaped once more, and hurtled toward the nearby Ling Han. Ling Han had been waiting for this moment, and launched his fists toward their faces without as much as a single glance backward. He didn't hold back, and a small mountain river appeared behind him as he unleashed his full power. Pooh! The people around the lake all burst in laughter. They had seen all kinds of mountain rivers before, but they had never seen one this small. Xue Yanyu was even more confused. Ling Han had been so powerful in the Shattering Void tier, so how had he become so weak after breaking through to the Mountain River tier? The size of one's mountain river directly correlated to their power. "You're seeking death." Yi Wenshan and his Tang Hua both wore malicious smiles. Ling Han had only just broken through to the Mountain River tier, yet he actually dared to clash with them? He truly didn't know the spelling of the word, die. In fact, they even held back a fraction of their power so as not to directly crush Ling Han to death. Crushing a junior brother to death under the watchful gazes of everyone was quite a large crime. Pang! Pang! The 2 people's arms were easily pushed aside by Ling Han's fists. Meanwhile, Ling Han's fists were barely affected as they continued hurtling toward the 2 people's faces. What? The 2 of them didn't even have the time to cry out in alarm. However, the expressions on their faces said everything. There was shock, bewilderment, and terror. He had only just entered the Mountain River tier, and his mountain river was also so small. How could he possess such terrifying power? Before this thought had finished flashing through their minds, a fist had already smashed into their faces. As though they had been belted by a god tool, the flesh on their faces started rippling like waves. Then, tooth after tooth came flying out of their mouths. Afterward, even their bodies started to flail about like ragdolls. After drawing a long arc through the air, both of them landed in the lake with a loud plop. Ah! They instantly shrieked in pain, and started frantically swimming back to the bank. Their skin and flesh started dissolving at a rate that was visible to the naked eye. Even when they channeled their origin power at full strength, the effect was only minimal. They were only able to delay the dissolving of their flesh by a short moment. Everyone was dumbstruck by this sight. Who could have envisioned this result? Although Yi Wenshan and Tang Hua were only ranked in the 4 and 500s, one had to realize something. Just how many students did the low extreme division of the Northern Institution have? Almost 500 students could enter the Northern Institution every 20 years, and it would take them a maximum of 100 years to advance to the low extreme division. Also, just who entered the Scarlet Heaven Academy yet couldn't break through to the Mountain River tier. In other words, everyone could advance to the low extreme division. However, it would become especially difficult to advance starting from here. Taking tens of thousands of years to break through to the medium extreme was a common sight. Of course, the Scarlet Heaven Academy only accepted prodigies. Thus, one would be expelled from the academy if they couldn't break through to the medium extreme within 10,000 years. Even with the assumption that one would only remain in the low extreme for 5,000 years, the number of students in the low extreme division would still exceed 100,000. So, was being ranked in the top several hundred out of 100,000 impressive? Converting this number, such ranks would be equivalent to ranks of top 20 in the Shattering Void tier division. However, Ling Han had sent them flying with a mere 2 punches. He was far too powerful. More importantly, he had only just entered the Mountain River tier. He was already so powerful now, so how powerful would he become in the future? It's rumored that this person from the small world passed 8 levels of the Academy's assessment, meaning he has the potential to become a 4-star genius. If he has the potential of a 4-star genius, that means he'll have a battle prowess on par with the early stage of the medium extreme upon breaking through to the low extreme. No wonder he's so strong. But don't Yi Wenshan and Tang Hua have battle prowesses at the early stage of medium extreme as well?
And there's two of them. No. They obviously didn't know how powerful Ling Han was. They underestimated him, and didn't use their full power, so of course they could only eat the fruits of their own evil deeds.
I see.
Everyone nodded in agreement. First off, Ling Han was indeed strong. Second, Yi Wenshan and Tang Hua had both underestimated their enemy. This allowed them to breathe sighs of relief. Although 4-star geniuses were freakish, at least they were still within their realms of acceptance. However, there were also some who fell into deep thought. It was clear that Ling Han had only advanced into the immortal level after refining mountain river stones. If the distance between the early stage and middle stage of the low extreme was represented by 100 steps, then he was at most only standing on the first 10 steps right now. So, would his battle prowess reach the level of a 5-star genius when he arrived at the 100th step? It wasn't likely, but it was possible. This was the most terrifying part. 5-star genius. Just thinking about it was enough to make one quake in fear. Ling Han turned around. In his eyes, he had merely swatted aside 2 flies. In any case, his target wasn't these 2 people, nor was it by Yuanzi and Fan Yong. Rather, it was Zhao Luan. He continued forward, and his advance was still relatively relaxed. Just his power alone had already reached the early stage of the medium extreme. This was especially advantageous as what good was a powerful battle prowess in this place? The best way to resist these gravity fields was naturally one's own power. Thanks to the restriction on cultivation level, how many people here could compete with Ling Han's power? Moreover, in addition to having outstanding power, Ling Han had an even more terrifying physique. Under the pressure of the gravity fields, others had to protect their hearts, brains, and other vital organs with their origin power. Otherwise, these organs would be mercilessly crushed by the immense pressure of the gravity fields. However, Ling Han didn't need to do this, as his physique was already on par with level 2 godly metal. How could the gravity field hurt him? Thus, everything was fine as long as his power could stand up to the weight of the gravity fields. 60 steps, 80 steps, 90 steps. He walked at a brisk pace, and only slowed down after reaching the 90th step. A look of exertion appeared on his face. Indeed, only 10 or so people could reach the island and obtain a mountain river stone each time. This was definitely no easy feat. Sweat rolled down Ling Han's forehead. Chong. His godly bones clacked, and his skin also trembled slightly. The gravity fields became increasingly terrifying, and tried to rip his skin and snap his godly bones. However, Ling Han's footsteps remained firm as he continued to walk forward. Fuck! This guy's a freak! Someone by the lake shouted in astonishment. Everyone nodded in agreement. Freak was the only word that could describe the advancing male. After all, there were a few locations in this mystery realm which produced mountain river stones. As a result, those who entered were scattered in several places. Although people had already arrived at the Crimson Lake 3 days ago, they all had yet to reach the island and obtain a mountain river stone. However, it was evident that this was about to change. Chapter 960. Success. 95, 96, 97. As the saying went, to cover 90 miles out of 100 brought the traveler no farther than midway. Although only a few steps remained, these steps just so happened to be the most difficult to cross. In fact, calling it midway was already being generous. 98, 99. Ling Han faltered slightly. Then, he drew on all his power and took the last step. The overwhelming power that weighed down on his body instantly vanished. He immediately lost balance and stumbled forward a few steps before regaining his balance. This so-called island was incredibly small, measuring no more than 6 meters in radius. It was also extremely even, and appeared much like a large boulder with its tip cleanly cut off. There were a dozen or so earthen yellow mountain river stones scattered around this island. Can't I pick up 2 or even more at once? Ling Han bent down and grabbed a mountain river stone. Pang! A burst of power instantly erupted from the island and sent him flying outward, all the way to the bank of the lake. He plunked heavily to the ground. He scratched his head as he trained his eyes on the island once more. He wanted to visit the island again and use both his hand and blood-sucking origin gold to grab a mountain river stone. If he performed these two actions at once, would he be able to obtain 2 mountain river stones? However, several ill-meaning people were already glaring at Ling Han as they walked over. Although ordinary mountain river stones could arouse one's greed, they were still not valuable enough for people to fight over before so many others. Who could guess who would become the final victor? However, it was a different story right now. This was a mountain river stone with a special attribute. Special attributes in mountain river stones could bring permanent improvements to one's battle prowess. It could elevate one from a 1-star genius to a 2-star genius, or from a 2-star genius to a 3-star genius. Of course, such improvements definitely required more than one special mountain river stone. However, without the first mountain river stone, where would the second come from? Say, who could control their greed? Even if there was only a 1% chance, people would still take a punt on it. So what if you're a 4-star genius? Your true cultivation level, the early stage of the low extremize, clear for all to see. At best, your battle prowess will only reach the early stage of the medium extreme. Many here have also reached this level. In fact, some have already surpassed it.
Hand the mountain river stone over.
The first person to act was an elder at the peak stage of the low extreme. With the help of a secret technique, his battle prowess soared to the peak stage of the medium extreme. The elder was confident that he could crush Ling Han. Ling Han didn't say anything nonsensical like, "I obtained this mountain river stone, so what right do you have to take it?" He placed the mountain river stone in the Black Tower and said calmly, "Take it if you can." In the martial arts world, only strength mattered. Only weaklings would yammer and complain.
Brat, don't ruin yourself.
Several other people walked over, all of them individuals of an older generation. Right now, only cultivators with a battle prowess at the peak stage of the medium extreme had the right to fight over the mountain river stone. Without 5-star geniuses, 4-star geniuses at the peak stage of the low extreme were undoubtedly unrivaled beings in this place. There were 22 such people here, though only 7 of them had stepped forward. The rest remained put as 7 people were already enough to deal with the matter. Afterward, the most important matter would be deciding which of the 22 people the mountain river stone would belong to. Ling Han smiled slightly and asked, "What's the hurry? Look, I'm planning to obtain another one. So, why don't you fight over it after I obtain a few more?"
Fuck!
Everyone looked at Ling Han dazedly. Is this person smart or retarded? Who would complain about not being robbed enough? And he'd even go out of his way to earn more resources so others could snatch more. The elders looked at each other and nodded. Ling Han wouldn't be able to escape anyway, so what harm could this do? Leave that mountain river stone here. Then you can go and retrieve the second one. No one will stop you. Another elder stepped forward, greed glistening in his little eyes. It would be a huge achievement if he could obtain a mountain river stone with a special attribute. He himself didn't have room for improvement, but his grandson was extremely talented, and could perhaps become a 2-star genius after absorbing the energy of an extreme-weight mountain river stone. Originally, Ling Han hadn't wanted to waste his time on these elders. After all, his battle prowess was only 5 stars if he didn't use the ultimate arrow. Yet, these people were hell-bent on causing him trouble. It seemed like he had to show off his might. Ling Han retrieved his bow and pointed an ultimate arrow at that elder. A cold chill instantly gripped at everyone's heart, causing their bodies to tremble involuntarily as a feeling of uncontrollable terror formed in their minds. This arrow would definitely have an earth-shattering effect if it was released. "I can only use this technique a limited number of times," Ling Han said calmly. "However, I can guarantee that a person will die with each arrow I release. Who wants to try?" No one dared to answer. Although they were a little doubtful, what if? The aura emanating from the arrow was indeed petrifying. It possessed an overwhelming might that seemed to be able to destroy everything in its path. No one was willing to become its first victim. "So, does anyone else want to command me?"
Ling Han swept his gaze over the others, the tip of his arrow following his sight.
Sweat poured down the faces of those who were targeted by the arrow. Although this arrow possessed an incredible might, everyone knew that Ling Han could only fire a few shots. There were more than 20 of them gathered here, so they definitely had the ability to capture and suppress Ling Han.
However, who was willing to sacrifice themselves?
No one. They weren't from the same clan, So why would they fight for the benefits of someone else? Even if they were from the same clan, there was still the problem of close relations or distant relations. Unless it was for their own child or grandchild, who was willing to risk their lives. The group of elders slowly stepped back. This was a sign that they wouldn't attack Ling Han. Of course, how long they would maintain this attitude was a completely different matter. Once they smelled a chance, they definitely wouldn't hold back. Ling Han also put his bow away. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to keep the existence of his Black Tower a secret, how would he need to worry about these people? He started to cross the lake again. However, he immediately felt an astonishing weight upon stepping onto the first stone. This weight was on par with what he had felt on the 80th stone during his first crossing. When he reached the 30th stone, he had no option but to stop and head back. If he kept going, he would only end up being pushed into the water by the gravity fields. Some breathed sighs of relief upon seeing Ling Han give up, while cold smiles appeared on the faces of others. He was only able to obtain one mountain river stone. In the end, he's still unable to compete against senior brother Zhao. Naturally, senior brother Zhao is the most powerful prodigy of these past 1,000 years, and there's a chance he'll reach the heavenly body tier in the future. He's not a 1 in 1,000 year prodigy, but a 1 in 10,000 year prodigy. Ling Han's merely an ant from a small world. Numerous people started throwing barbs at Ling Han. This was naturally because of their jealousy. Xue Yanyu and Hu Feiyun both walked over. Don't lose hope, Xue Yanyu said. You've already obtained one mountain river stone, and such a result is already outstanding. Moreover, you've only just reached the mountain river tier. You definitely won't be weaker than Zhao Luan when you reach the peak stage of the low extreme. Ling Han smiled and replied, protect me for a while. I'm going to try again after refining a few mountain river stones. Chapter 961. New Attempt. Ling Han didn't wait for Xue Yenyu's answer, and directly extracted the essence from a new mountain river stone. Of course, this wasn't the special mountain river stone that he had obtained recently. Rather, it was one that he had obtained from the group of 7 that he had killed. He had obtained a total of 2 mountain river stones from them, but as he had been busy with his journey, he hadn't refined the 2 stones yet. The eyes of the others became green with envy as they saw Ling Han refining a mountain river stone openly, and they could barely contain themselves, not dashing over and snatching it away. Fortunately, they were able to stop themselves when they realized that it was only an ordinary mountain river stone. Ordinary mountain river stones were only capable of reducing the cultivation time of cultivators. Although they were extremely valuable, prodigies weren't too fussy about the small amount of time that they could save. Only mountain river stones with special attributes could be considered precious treasures. They could genuinely raise one's battle prowess. Fearing Ling Han's battle prowess was only part of the reason that no one charged over. The other reason was because of Hu Feiyun. She was the 9th king. Thinking of the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire's fondness toward the 9th king, who would dare to disrespect her? Even the members of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire didn't dare touch the 9th king. It was much the same for the Eternity Sky and Jade Drop majestic empires. In fact, they even had to risk their lives to rescue her if she were to come across any dangers. After all, everyone was aware that the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire would definitely erupt in rage if the 9th king were to die here. She definitely wouldn't hesitate to bury everyone here alive as a tribute to the 9th king. There was no need for doubt the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire could definitely steel her heart to do that. Xue Yanyu wasn't stupid. It was impossible to come across Hu Feiyun during normal occasions. Now that she had such a great opportunity, she naturally had to act friendly with Hu Feiyun. The 9th king was charming and naive, and knew little of the world's dangers and evils. Before long, she had already fallen into a cheerful conversation with Xue Yanyu. Ling Han casually cultivated in front of everyone else. In the eyes of others, such action was crazy and rash. However, Ling Han was incredibly relaxed. This was because no one else knew that his physique had already reached the toughness of a level 2 godly metal. Who here could injure him? Even if they used divine flames, they would probably still need to refine him for several days, right? If they instead chose to use the most potent poison, it would still be quite a while before he was actually taken down by it. After all, The unique environment here guaranteed that Ling Han was almost completely safe.
The mountain river stone in his hand was slowly becoming dimmer.
Meanwhile, the large mountain in his dantian was rapidly growing larger. The lower one's cultivation level, the faster one's growth. When the mountain river stone became dull and brittle, the first mountain in Ling Han's dantian had already grown 100-fold. Now, it was finally starting to look a little bit like a mountain. I'm almost at the middle stage of the low extreme, Ling Han thought to himself. But this mountain river is already about to form and condense a river, so why is the mountain still so small? Is it because I'm relying on the mountain river stone to rank up? Whatever, everything will be fine as long as my battle prowess matches my tier. Ling Han stood up and started to cross the river again. This time, he charged to the 60th stone in one breath before finally slowing down. After raising his cultivation level, his improvement was especially clear. However, a feeling of strain once again overcame him when he reached the 90th stone.
He pushed himself to take another step forward, yet all he could do was helplessly plop into the river.
Ha ha ha! A few people immediately started to howl with laughter.
They looked as if they were about to break into gleeful applause at any moment.
However, looks of shock spread across their faces in the very next instant. It was because Ling Han was actually swinging his arms and swimming toward the island. Monster! He's definitely a monster. It wasn't that no one had thought of this before. Since they had made it more than halfway, why couldn't they swim forward? In fact, the distance was even shorter if they swam. The answer was simple.
It was because this was actually more difficult, more than 100 times more difficult to be precise.
Swimming away from the island was extremely easy. Apart from the corrosive nature of the lake water, there wasn't even the tiniest bit of resistance. However, swimming toward the island was a completely different story. In addition to the threat of the lake water, there was also a terrifying resistive power. It was like a reverse gravity that was pushing one away from the island. Moreover, there was nothing to push off in the water, so it was naturally much more difficult to swim forward. It could be said that apart from being corroded by the lake water, it was basically impossible to move forward if one tried to swim toward the island. However, although Ling Han wasn't advancing, his body wasn't being corroded either. This was far too astonishing. What kind of physique could resist the corrosion of the lake water? After swimming for a short while, Ling Han could only reluctantly turn back. The pressure was instantly lifted off his shoulders, and he made it back to the bank in no time. The clothes on his body had already transformed into ragged strips that were now peeling off and falling onto the ground. However, the unharmed muscles on his body radiated a divine glow. Ling Han retrieved a new outfit and quickly dressed himself. Being able to resist the corrosive ability of the lake water wasn't merely because of his strong physique. It was also because he had been channeling the indestructible Heaven Scroll. This skill allowed him to resist all spells, and the corrosive lake water was nothing in the face of this powerful skill. Ha! Have you guys not seen me before? Ling Han chuckled. Why are your expressions so weird? Right now, both Xue Yanyu and Hu Feiyun's eyes were wide with disbelief. How could they not be astonished? The corrosive ability of the Crimson Lake was widely acknowledged to be terrifying. No matter who fell in, they would definitely lose a layer of skin.
However, Ling Han had swum around it as if it were merely an ordinary lake.
This was extremely astounding. Even the old fellows from before felt their hearts palpitate in fear. They were secretly thankful that they hadn't clashed with Ling Han just then.
With such a powerful physique, who here could injure him?
Ling Han sat down and retrieved the last remaining ordinary mountain river stone. After refining it, he would most likely be able to reach the island. He didn't hesitate any longer, and immediately started to refine this last mountain river stone. A few hours later, the mountain river stone in his hand once again crumbled into dust. During these several hours, many more people had arrived at this place. There were also some who left after realizing that they had no hope here. The physique that Ling Han had displayed was far too powerful, and it had caused a large majority of people to squash their wandering thoughts. However, a prodigy from the Eternity Sky Majestic Empire was a part of the new arrivals. His cultivation level had reached the peak of the low extreme, and he was even a 3-star genius. After a Herculean effort, he had also managed to obtain an extreme weight mountain river stone. From this, It could be clearly seen that battle prowess wasn't the deciding factor that determined whether or not one could reach the island. There were numerous individuals who were more powerful than him, yet up until now, only he and Ling Han had succeeded in reaching the island. It could be seen that strength was the true might. That individual was named Yu Hao, and not only was he extremely powerful, but he also had two elders guarding him by his side. They both possessed incredible battle prowess, which resulted in the surrounding people not daring to act recklessly. There had been over 20 such elders not long ago, but almost all of them had left a short while back. There were only 7 of them remaining, and as such, they weren't confident of achieving certain victory in battle. As a result, they naturally didn't dare to recklessly charge into battle. Yu Hao appeared especially smug as he laughed loudly and swept his gaze around the surroundings. Who didn't know that being able to reach the island represented outstanding ability? Only a mere 10 or so people would be able to reach the island each time. Being imbued with the secret techniques of the old monsters was nowhere near enough. This was an extreme test of power. Congratulations, young master. The 2 elderly servants were all smiles as they congratulated Yu Hao. Yu Hao was extremely self-satisfied, yet a peculiar expression quickly spread across his face. This was because many people were naturally stunned speechless by his great achievement. However, there were also many people who remained calm and unmoving as if they hadn't seen his glorious feat at all. Are they blind? Little did he know that Ling Han had already succeeded once before. Although he hadn't succeeded on his second attempt, his actions that time were even more shocking than when he had succeeded. Right at this moment, Ling Han stood up. He had finally reached the end of the middle stage of the low extreme. He was only a tiny bit off from forming a river, whose formation was the boundary separating the middle stage from the late stage. Yu Hao chuckled coldly upon seeing Ling Han's movements. He had only just succeeded in reaching the island, and this person was already trying to follow in his footsteps. His actions were truly nothing more than a joke. Tui, you're biting off more than you can chew. Chapter 962. Reaching the island a second time. However, much to Yu Hao's surprise, many people actually wore expressions of interest upon seeing Ling Han attempt to cross the river. Am I seeing things? A strong sense of jealousy welled up in Yu Hao's heart. He was the one who had succeeded in reaching the island, so why was everyone more interested at that person? Fuck! He hasn't even reached the late stage of the low extreme yet. He only has a mountain, but doesn't have a river. Could it be that he's a descendant of some powerful figure? Yu Hao was a small-minded person, and his expression instantly darkened when he saw that his thunder was stolen by someone who hadn't even reached the late stage of the mountain river tier yet. He secretly decided to give Ling Han a lesson when he came back. Anyhow, he wasn't a person from his country, so it mattered little even if he was a descendant of a powerful figure. Everything would be fine as long as he didn't kill him in front of everyone else. After experiencing a large growth in his cultivation level, Ling Han's speed was naturally quicker this time around. It seemed as if he were walking along flat ground, and the ease with which he advanced caused the onlookers to almost spit their tongues out in astonishment. One had to realize that this was the second time that Ling Han was attempting to reach the island. This was already on par with Zhao Luan. Moreover, when had Zhao Luan completed his grand feat of reaching the island 2 times in a row? It was when he was at the peak of the low extreme. In reality, no one was given any special treatment. The gravity fields bearing down on the stones were the same every time, so it was clearly advantageous to have a higher cultivation level. There was no notion of having it easier just because one was undefeated in their own tier. It was evident that Ling Han still hadn't reached the late stage of the low extreme yet. This meant that there was still room for him to grow stronger, and as such, it was completely possible for him to reach the island for a 3rd time, or perhaps, even a terrifying 4th time. Heavens! After arriving before the last 10 stones, Ling Han finally felt some pressure bearing down on him. However, he still took large and decisive steps forward. 98, 99, 100. He reached the island once again. Everyone was holding their numb heads. Both had reached the island 2 times, but Ling Han was even more freakish than Zhao Luan. If news of this traveled back, it was likely that the entire imperial capital would be stunned. It could elevate Ling Han standing immensely, or it could also plunge him into a dark and bottomless abyss. Ling Han grabbed at a mountain river stone with one hand and tossed his blood-sucking origin gold outward with another in an attempt to obtain another mountain river stone. With his current ability, of course he could complete both these actions at the same time. However, when his hand and the blood-sucking origin gold came into contact with mountain river stones at the same time, pa! The blood-sucking origin gold violently bounced up, and wasn't able to grab that mountain river stone. Pang! Ling Han was sent flying back to the bank of the lake again. This brat actually succeeded as well? A look of jealousy fell across Yu Hao's face. He had originally been unique and unmatched. Now, however, someone was standing neck and neck with him and stealing part of his glory. Being the petty-minded person that he was, he immediately walked up to Ling Han. He clapped his hands and said, "Congratulations, congratulations! You've also managed to successfully reach the island after me. Ha! I've heard that the difficulty will significantly decrease for a short while after someone has successfully reached the island. Heh, in that case, you've benefited from my glory." The shamelessness of this person was quite startling. Was he purposefully playing down someone else's achievement to elevate his own standing? Those who had been here for a long time all started to roar with laughter. They had personally witnessed Ling Han reaching the island twice with very own eyes. What did reaching the island twice signify? At least in the past 1,000 years, only one other person had managed this feat, Zhao Luan. You've only reached the island once, yet you dare to say that Ling Han is benefiting from your glory? What an absolute joke. Embarrassment and anger appeared across Yu Hao's face. "What are you all laughing at?" he asked coldly. "Is there anything to laugh at?" "Heh, young man, you're still unaware, aren't you? Before you arrived, our young friend Ling Han already reached the island once," an elder explained. As everyone here was at the low extreme, he didn't dare refer to himself as a senior even though he was clearly older. This was a rule of the martial arts world. Seniority could only be determined by ability. Pooh! Yu Hao spluttered in shock as an incredibly colorful expression spread across his face. He was struck with disbelief. How was this possible? He was well aware that it would become insanely more difficult to reach the island after successfully arriving there once. It was simply an impossible task. In the past 1,000 years, only Zhao Luan had managed to accomplish such a feat. Once had to realize that Ling Han hadn't even reached the late stage of the low extreme yet. If all this were true, then didn't this mean that there was a possibility of him reaching the island for a third time after leveling up to the late stage of the low extreme? Bull**T. You're definitely spewing bull**T. Yu Hao furiously shook his head. Heh! More people cracked up in mocking laughter. In fact, if they hadn't witnessed it with their own eyes, they also wouldn't have believed that Ling Han could possibly be so powerful. Hearing the mocking laughter of so many people, Yu Hao finally accepted the fact that he had made a great fool out of himself. His face involuntarily flushed red. He glanced at the island in the middle of the lake. Then, he gritted his teeth and dashed toward the stones once more. He was going to attempt reaching the island for a second time. He crossed the first 10 stones with great difficulty, but after that, his body would sway with each extra step that he took. Plop! In the end, he still fell into the lake. He instantly shrieked in pain, and started to hurriedly swim back to the bank. He had failed. As he had failed at a relatively early stage, he arrived back at the bank in no time. His wounds weren't too serious, yet the mental blow was significant. He was lesser than another person. That person was a whole 2 sub-minor levels below him, yet he had managed to reach the island twice. With such results as a comparison, it was abundantly clear who was more able. Ling Han merely flashed a smile at him. Being able to reach the island once was already a commendable feat. He withdrew his gaze and started to ponder how to reach the island a third time. With his current ability, it would be impossible. He could still spare a shred of power when reaching the island for a second time. However, he could at most only make it a third of the way if he made his third attempt now. Well, he still had 2 mountain river stones, ones with special attributes no less. Would refining an extreme weight mountain river stone here create some resistance to the extreme weight bearing over from the island? Let me refine another one and test this out. Ling Han retrieved a earthen yellow mountain river stone, and started to refine it in his hand. Many people looked at him with envious expressions. However, Ling Han's abilities and physique were clear for all to see.
And Hu Feiyun was also standing just to the side. Most people only dared to think about but not act upon their greed. "Young master, let's leave," the two elderly servants said to Yu Hao. They had a special mountain river stone on them, and such an item would attract greed from others. It was best to leave earlier. Yu Hao stared at Ling Han, and only nodded after a long time. Fine. If he refined the mountain river stone here, then it was extremely likely that he would directly break through to the medium extreme. As an end result, he would be targeted and then killed by the regulations of this place. It wasn't as if no one had tried this before. Ling Han continued to extract power from the mountain river stone. In his dantian, a river was slowly forming from nothing. No wonder mountain river stones are such hot property. Their effects are even more outstanding than amazing pills and medicines. Although the number of mountain river stones needed to level up would increase along with one's cultivation level, a maximum of 10 would probably suffice to help him reach the peak stage of the low extreme. Thankfully, mountain river stones could only forcefully form mountain rivers. They couldn't aid with one's comprehension, nor could they help one surpass a minor level. Otherwise, such items would be even more astonishing. To Ling Han's surprise, he discovered that a streak of earthen yellow-veined pattern had appeared on the mountain that he had formed not long ago. It was very shallow in the beginning, yet as the power of the mountain river stone continued to surge in, this veined pattern also became deeper and deeper. This was a divine pattern. Chapter 963. Third Success. What was a god tool? If a divine pattern was carved on a weapon, then the weapon would release a unique might once the divine pattern was activated. Thereupon, the weapon would become a god tool. The materials used to craft god tools weren't limited to godly metals. It was just that metals were the most widely used material, and as a result, a large majority of god tools was made using godly metals. And now, a divine pattern had actually appeared on Ling Han's mountain river. This signified that, from a certain perspective, his mountain river could be considered as a god tool. An extreme weight god tool. He could activate the divine pattern with a mere thought, thereby imbuing his attacks with an extreme weight effect, which increased his battle prowess. Pa! A few hours later, the mountain river stone in his hand once again crumbled into dust. I'm almost 1/3 of the way to the late stage of the low extreme. As expected, the higher one's cultivation level, the more mountain river stones are needed to level up. In fact, the increase in mountain river stones needed is quite astonishing. When I reach the perfection level, I'll probably need hundreds of mountain river stones just to rise by a sub-minor level. Let me try again. He prepared to reach the island for the third time. My God! He's trying to reach the island for the third time? Everyone felt dizzy with disbelief upon seeing Ling Han step forward again. Oi, oi, oi. Is this real? Has anyone achieved this before? No, definitely not. Everyone shook their heads vigorously. Although very few people had managed to reach the island twice, there was always that one or two every several thousand years. During times when prodigies appeared in large numbers, perhaps 3 or 4 people would manage to reach the island twice within a century. However, there was no precedent of someone reaching the island 3 times. Yes, someone has. Someone suddenly exclaimed firmly. Who? It was around 300,000 years ago. There was a tremendous prodigy. Su Ran. Indeed, it was Su Ran. It's rumored that he reached the island a miraculous 3 times. Afterward, he instantly shot to fame. However, he suddenly disappeared for some reason. Who's Su Ran? Most people had never heard this name before. Ling Han couldn't care less about what others thought, and he calmly stepped onto the first stone. This time, he wasn't in a hurry to advance. Instead, he activated the divine pattern on the mountain river stone to resist the gravity fields. Wang! A gravity field was also unleashed from his body, though its effect was naturally much weaker than those that existed on the stones. However, it was still able to provide a certain degree of resistance. As expected. Ling Han nodded in his mind. Zhao Luan had most likely refined his mountain river stone after reaching the island for the first time. Then, he used his gravity field to resist the gravity fields of the stones, and was thus able to succeed in reaching the island for a second time. Of course,
The main reason was still due to his powerful abilities. These special extreme weight mountain river stones could only add an icing to the cake. If one was too weak, their effect would be meaningless. Ling Han started pushing forward. The first 30 stones were extremely easy to cross. However, a look of exertion appeared on his face when he crossed the next 30 stones. Afterward, his body swayed with every step that he took. The 80th stone. He stopped on this stone, and sweat poured down his forehead. The godly bones in his body were all clacking under the immense pressure. Heavens! He's actually reached the 80th stone. He's only just advanced to the late stage of the low extreme. Gasp! He'll definitely be able to complete 3 visits in another 10 years. Everyone wore different expressions, many of them malicious. He was a super genius, so they definitely couldn't allow him to grow. Ling Han didn't persist. Instead, he turned around and retreated. He started refining his last mountain river stone. He was determined to plunder this island as if it were a treasure vault. After refining the mountain river stone, Ling Han reached 2/3 of the way to the late stage of the low extreme. This speed was incredibly terrifying. However, the Heavenly Sea Mystery Realm only opened once every 10 years, and the number of people who could obtain mountain river stones was also very small. It was especially rare that someone could obtain 5 mountain river stones as he had. A second divine pattern appeared on the large mountain in his dantian. The power of the gravity field has doubled, Ling Han whispered to himself. Sure enough, the improvement at the start was the greatest. After forming the third divine pattern, however, the power of the gravity field only increased by 50%. You can probably make it this time. There was an expectant look in Xue Yenyu's eyes as she nodded at Ling Han. Reaching the island 3 times is a miracle. Can this man perform a miracle? Ling Han will definitely succeed. Hu Feiyun had a blind trust in Ling Han's abilities. That evil beast before had been killed by Ling Han, so what difficulty did this pose? Ling Han chuckled and said, "Of course, I'll definitely succeed this time." He stepped forward again. It was indeed different from before. He had 2 extreme weight divine patterns now, and when he activated them, they could provide a large amount of resistance to the gravity fields on the stones. Moreover, as his cultivation level had soared dramatically, his power had naturally also increased immensely. As a result, he was able to easily cross the first 80 stones. After that, his speed started to slow down. His expression became strained, but he still managed to reach the 90th stone in no time at all. The most important steps were these last 10 steps. This was the true challenge. 91, 92, 93. Everyone looked on intently. Were they going to see the birth of a legend? One had to realize that Ling Han still hadn't reached the peak stage of the low extreme yet. As such, he still had quite some room for improvement. If he succeeded this time, didn't that mean he could perhaps try to reach the island for a 4th time? This was far too terrifying. 97, 98, 99. He was only 1 step away. A smile spread across Ling Han's face as he took one last step forward. He had reached the island. 3rd success. Sinister killing intent instantly appeared on many people's faces, most of whom were from the Eternity Sky and Jade Drop majestic empires. It was very likely that such a genius could reach the heavenly body tier. Moreover, the increase or decrease in number of such cultivators could directly influence the strength of a majestic empire. They had to kill him before he became too powerful. Ling Han wasn't greedy this time, and only picked up 1 mountain river stone before being ejected back onto the bank. He immediately refined this mountain river stone and raised his cultivation level to a stage close to the peak stage of the low extreme. I only need 4 or 5 more mountain river stones to reach the pinnacle of the low extreme. However, even so, it's still impossible for me to break through to the medium extreme. After all, I've fully relied on external items to advance my cultivation level, yet my body doesn't have the corresponding comprehension. When I get back, I need to calm down and take my time to comprehend this cultivation level. However, the more mountain river stones I obtain, the better. I can use them for the medium extreme, high extreme, and even perfection level. It's best if they contain special attributes as well, for those can also elevate my battle prowess. Although Ling Han knew that it was close to impossible to achieve, he still tried to reach the island for the fourth time. It came as no surprise that he failed. In fact, he was a long way off, and only managed to advance a dozen or so steps. By the looks of it, I need to stabilize my cultivation level in addition to reaching the pinnacle of the low extreme if I want to reach the island for a fourth time. I only have a mere 10 years. Do I have a chance to enter here again? Ling Han felt that this wasn't likely. It was much more likely that he would make some preparations then strive to reach the medium extreme after leaving this place. This probably wouldn't take 10 years. Then I have to maximize gains this time. Chapter 964. Single-Eyed Demonic Ape. Reaching the island 4 times was unrealistic, so Ling Han could only give up. Xue Yanyu had also attempted to reach the island before, but she was only able to cross 80 steps even though she was extremely talented. It looked as if she was very close, but 20 steps was in fact quite a huge distance. Hu Feiyun also made an attempt under Ling Han's encouragement, and surprisingly, she actually succeeded. Moreover, she still had power to spare, causing the surrounding people all click their tongues in wonder. Sure enough, the 9th king, who was highly regarded by the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, was not merely a naive and beautiful woman. Ling Han encouraged her to try again. Hu Feiyun had a blind trust in him as he had rescued her before. Thus, she quickly began her second attempt. This time, it was clear that she was feeling much more strained. She stopped and retreated after crossing 60 stones. When seeing that she could advance as quickly as a rabbit, Ling Han instantly knew that she was still far from reaching her full potential. It was just that the 9th king didn't possess the mindset to endure pain, so her first reaction when facing difficulties was to retreat. Ling Han believed that even if she couldn't reach the island a second time, reaching 90 steps was still completely within her capability. In fact, if she gritted her teeth and pushed forward, it wouldn't be too difficult for her to complete the grand feat of reaching the island twice. He believed that if the 9th king were someone else, they would definitely give it their best effort. First off, special attribute mountain river stones were extremely valuable. Secondly, reaching the island was also a tremendous honor. Moreover, who would dare target the 9th king? Ling Han involuntarily shook his head. Hu Feiyun was extraordinarily talented in martial arts, yet she lacked a competitive mindset. As such, it was possible that her future achievements might even be surpassed by Xue Yanyu. Let's go! Hu Feiyun was very satisfied that she had obtained a special attribute mountain river stone. She hadn't come here to train herself, nor had she come here for mountain river stones. Instead, she had only come because the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire wanted her to do so, and she didn't want to disappoint her sister. What an innocent girl! With such a personality, she should have never taken a martial arts path. They left Crimson Lake and headed toward Flame Cave. Flame Cave was another location in this mystery realm that was certain to produce mountain river stones. Moreover, these were special attribute mountain river stones. They could provide cultivators with flame divine patterns, thereby imbuing their attacks with the might of divine flames. This was extremely powerful and useful. However, Flame Cave was far more dangerous than Crimson Lake, a place where people couldn't voluntarily advance or retreat. Flame Cave was like a demonic cave, and it was brimming with lava beasts, a type of demonic beast. They were born with the ability to control divine flames, which caused their battle prowess to exceed their cultivations by a full level. So be it if this was all. However, the most important point was that the most powerful demonic beast here had already reached the level of high extreme. This was extremely terrifying, and whoever came across them could only choose to flee. In fact, they might not even be able to escape. Of course, there was only one such demonic beast, the king of the lava beasts. This demonic beast barely ventured out, and would usually remain in the deepest part of the flame cave. However, if one were unlucky enough to run into it, they would definitely meet a wretched end. Of course, Ling Han definitely had to visit the place. He had the Black Tower, so he wouldn't be flustered even if he came across the king of the lava beasts. Anyhow, his physique was incredibly powerful right now, and there was no way he could be insta-killed by someone of the high extreme. How could he die when he had the help of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll? The three of them set off after studying their map for a while. Hu Feiyun had no enterprising spirit, so she couldn't care less where they went. She had come merely because the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire had told her to do so. There was nothing more to it. Ling Han familiarized himself with the gravitational effects as he walked. This was so he could fuse it into his battle prowess. Even though I have 3 divine patterns, it's still not enough to elevate my battle prowess by 1 star. The higher my battle prowess, the harder it is to elevate it by another star. The number of stars will only go up if I increase my battle prowess manifold, perhaps even several dozen times. However, the divine patterns of gravity can produce wonderful effects if used properly. The so-called star geniuses aren't absolute, either. For example, I have a 90% chance of success if I ambush someone at the perfection level of the low extreme with my annihilating dragon star arrow. However, can I say that my battle prowess had reached 9 or even 10 stars? These numbers can only be used as rough estimates. Whoosh! A fierce wave-like fluctuation suddenly appeared in the dense forest ahead. Ling Han and Xue Yanyu immediately stopped, yet Hu Feiyun was completely oblivious and continued forward for a few steps, only stopping when she realized that both Ling Han and Xue Yanyu had already stopped. She turned around and asked, "Why did you both stop?" "Shiu, shiu, shiu." 3 people suddenly dashed out from the dense forest, all of them extremely disheveled and one of them drenched in blood. All 3 of them sprinted toward Ling Han and the others as if their lives depended on it. Ling Han didn't dare let his guard down. It was possible these 3 people were being pursued, yet it was also possible that they were merely acting, with their true aim being to ambush Ling Han and the others. One had to be extremely careful in Mystery Realms. Otherwise, they would die without even knowing what had happened. Pang! At this moment, a gigantic beast also charged out from the dense forest. It was a giant ape that was around 30 meters in height. It was almost as tall as the trees in the dense forest. Its body was raven black, and it looked like a magnified version of an ape. The only difference was that it had no eyes, bar for the vertical one on its forehead. This eye was extremely large, and almost took up half of its face. Who? The gigantic ape grabbed the person who was closest to it. Its body was 30 meters tall, yet its arms were surprisingly also 30 meters long. Its hand instantly arrived behind that person's back. "Fuck off!" The person screamed in shock and terror. They instantly unleashed their strongest sword strike. Pooh! The gigantic ape completely ignored this attack, and firmly gripped the person's body. The sword slashed into its palm, yet it was merely able to cut off a few strands of hair. The gigantic ape casually tossed the person into its mouth. Crack! The person was immediately crushed into 3 segments. Blood sprayed through the air as their head and legs fell from the corners of the gigantic ape's mouth. However, the gigantic ape curled its tongue around them, and immediately swallowed them into its belly. That was a cultivator at the peak stage of the low extreme, yet they had died just like that. Single-eye demonic ape! Xue Yanyu exclaimed in surprise. When mature, it can reach the peak stage of the high extreme. We're definitely no match for it. Run! As she spoke, the gigantic ape had already caught up to another person, and tossed them into its mouth. A cold chill shot down Ling Han's spine when he witnessed this sight. Although he liked eating demonic beasts, he was definitely no fan of eating in such a bloody manner. Those who weren't brave enough would definitely wet their pants in fright. "I can't move," Hu Feiyun stammered in a shaky voice. She was a timid person, so it was already praiseworthy that she hadn't wet herself yet. "Run away with her first." "I'll hold it back for a while," Ling Han said to Xue Yanyu. "No, this gigantic ape is too strong," Xue Yanyu said in a resolute voice. "There's no way you can hold it back by yourself. I'll help you." Women are so troublesome. However, Ling Han had to admit that he was slightly touched by her actions. Before such a terrifying gigantic ape, how many people could utter the words, "I'll help you"? Chapter 965, Flight. "You two really love each other." Hu Feiyun interrupted in a very untimely fashion. Ah! Ahead of them, the last member of the group of 3 was also devoured in a single bite by the giant ape. The big guy had obviously not had his fill yet, as his large eye focused on Ling Han and his companions, revealing a sinister light. "Run!" The 3 of them quickly broke into a run. Don't underestimate Hu Feiyun just because she looked completely like the type to be a burden. Her movement technique was frighteningly quick. She was directly a whole position faster than Ling Han and Xue Yanyu. The moment they started running, she was already in the lead, and took a position far ahead of them, looking like she would be leaving them in her dust at any moment. Faster! Faster! The ugly monster is about to catch up. And she still managed to turn her head around to urge them to be faster, wearing an expression that clearly expressed her thought. Why are the two of you running so slowly? Hong! A pillar of light shot out of the giant ape's lone eye. It was filled with destructive ability that would bring about ruin, and shot towards Ling Han and Xue Yanyu. That was because the two of them were practically running side by side, and this pillar of light was wide enough to hit them both at the same time. Ling Han made a decision on the spot. His feet paused slightly, and then he delivered a palm strike right at Xue Yanyu's back. A gentle but massive energy surged out, which caused Xue Yanyu's figure to speed up suddenly. But with this slowing down from him, the pillar of light instantly caught up with him. Pong! A thunderous bang rang out. The ground shook, and dirt and soil shot skywards. With the impact of the light pillar as the center, the ground itself was caving in, forming a gigantic deep pit. Ling Han! Xue Yanyu exclaimed in shock, tears brimming in her eyes. How would she have thought that Ling Han would give up his life in a critical situation just to save her? Hu Feiyun stopped as well, and consoled Xue Yanyu. Don't worry, Ling Han would be fine. He has even killed the large evil beast. If she knew the truth, she would naturally not be so confident. Xiao, a human figure shot out of the dust cloud. Who else could it be but Ling Han? As he ran, he said, "What are the two of you standing around stupidly for? Are you waiting for that huge demonic ape to make you into appetizers? I heard demonic apes are very perverted, so take care that you will not be captured to become his wife and bear him a pile of little monkeys." Ling Han. Xue Yanyu was immediately gritting her teeth. And to think she was touched, sad and furious all at the same time. But in the end, this guy was not only completely fine and unharmed, he was actually starting to mock her. Run! Ling Han called out quickly. Previously, he had only ducked into the Black Tower, and had not killed off the giant ape. Yet those two still had the mood to stand and chat idly. Bing! 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 The giant ape rushed out of the dust cloud as well. As the single eye swept over them, it couldn't help but look confused. Hit with a blast from it, this tiny human was actually still capable of running around in such a lively manner. After a momentary pause, it again ran out in pursuit. Ling Han and his companions continued to run. As they fled, they searched around for a hiding place. There! Ling Han pointed to their left side. There was a field of rocks there, forming a very complicated terrain. Furthermore, the demonic ape was too big, so they could just make use of this place as a spot to play hide-and-seek and shake it off their tail. They quickly changed their course and raced over. Xiao xiao! The lone eye of the demonic eye glowed, and once more shot out destructive pillars of light. In the end, with Ling Han's weaving in and out, all missed their target. In truth, Ling Han very much wanted Hu Feiyun to take it on once. Who knew, it might actually summon out the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire, just like how they had killed the 3 demon wolves. However, it was a huge question mark how many times they could actually use this move. What if it didn't work? Then, Hu Feiyun would really die because of him. Besides, the fact that the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire did not kill him once did not mean that she would not the next time. The might and intent of a ruler were difficult to predict. Last but not least, or rather most importantly, Hu Feiyun was running faster than a rabbit, so how could he make her be hit? Thankfully, they managed to escape into the pile of haphazard boulders in time. Indeed, the giant ape was greatly affected. Its body was too large, so it could not squeeze into the narrow paths formed by the craggy boulders, nor could it endlessly blast out attacks. However, the boulders here were really sturdy, actually being capable of enduring the mad attacks of this demon ape. Even so, the shock wave created by the streams of power was still an ordeal for Xue Yanyu and Hu Feiyun, who both felt like they were about to throw up blood. Only Ling Han looked like he was completely unaffected. Only when an attack from the high extreme landed on him directly could it actually deal him damage. What could the shock wave from an attack do to him? He guessed secretly that the Empress of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire would not appear as long as Hu Feiyun was not in a life-threatening crisis. Hu Feiyun's battle sense was not strong, but she was very skilled in running away. She pointed ahead and exclaimed, "There! There! There!" There was a mountain cave there. With how sturdy the boulders here were, as long as they managed to hide in the mountain cave, the giant ape would not be able to do anything to them. The single eye of the giant ape swept over, and it realized what they were planning. Instantly, it showed its might repetitively as its single shot out pillars of light like crazy. This took a great effect on Ling Han and his companions, shaking them so much that they were falling and stumbling over their own feet. "Go!" Ling Han grabbed Hu Feiyun, who had been sent flying over from ahead, and tossed her into the mountain cave first with a strong throw. Then, he took a large stride to the left, and pulled Xue Yanyu into his arms. The physique of these two women was not on the same level as his. Suffering the impact from the shockwave left by the light pillars attacking, their movement techniques were completely interrupted. Hong! The giant ape had also grabbed at them, wanting to capture both Ling Han and Xue Yanyu in a single move. "In your dreams," Ling Han humphed. Pressing his left hand, he caused the divine patterns of gravity to take effect. Wang, the large hand that the giant ape had stretched out, was instantly affected. With a bang, it fell, missing Ling Han by nearly 1 meter. The wind the impact produced caused his clothes to flutter. Ling Han did not have the time to let go of Xue Yanyu. Clasping her, he scrambled into the mountain cave. "Ang!" The giant ape released a furious roar. It could crush these little worms who knew how many times with its power, yet it actually did not manage to capture a single one of them on the whole way here. It was about to go mad with fury. It dug at the opening of the cave furiously, wanting to dig out the mountain cave by force. Yet, its brute force had lost effect at this time. This mountain cave was incredibly sturdy. It crouched down, stretched out a long and wide finger, and poked it into the cave opening. Quick! 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 Ling Han retreated, continuing to circulate the divine patterns of gravity with all his might to affect that huge finger whilst he continued to urge Hu Feiyun to run faster. "There is a turn ahead." Hu Feiyun called out in pleasant surprise, and hurriedly followed it. Ling Han quickly retreated back in as well. Ultimately, it was he who was affecting that huge finger, or they would have long since been chased down. Pang! The giant ape did not know that they had turned. Its finger continued to move ahead, and soon hit the stone wall at the end of the path. The impact was enough to cause this giant ape to roar out in pain. The rocks here were really too hard. Only then did it realize that Ling Han and his companions had turned. It quickly crooked its finger and started digging again. "Retreat, retreat further back," Ling Han called out. "We can't, we're at the end," Hu Feiyun called out from behind them. Her back was already stuck onto the wall. Pang! Ling Han crashed into her, and then he squeezed back as much as he could. The finger of the giant ape was still digging, and was just 1/2 meter away from them. They could clearly see the sharp claw on the finger. If they were directly touched, even Ling Han would be injured despite his physique. The sharp claw of an immortal-level demonic beast was on par with godly metal of the same level in the first place. It was also a very valuable material. After all, there was only so much godly metal available. "You're about to squeeze me to death," Hu Feiyun shouted. Ling Han's back was completely pressing down on her breasts. This cave was really too narrow. There was absolutely no way for two people to stand side by side, and they could only pile up one on top of another. And now, Hu Feiyun was at the bottom, Ling Han was in the middle, and Xue Yanyu was in front, and he still had his arms around her. Pervert. Only now did Xue Yanyu have the time to open her mouth and exclaim in low voice, her tone filled with embarrassment. Ling Han was momentarily stunned, and only now did he realize that he had grabbed a not too appropriate place, yet just so happened to be the tall mountain peaks on her chest, who asked their size to be just right for his large hand to grab securely. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.